We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And I'll say a congratulations to our good friend Lee Overstreet. He tweeted out images when he received his first dose of vaccine. So that is nice to see for someone we know. We know he is halfway inoculated. Rollout in Canada is slower. I'm going to be a couple of months before I get mine, but it's happening. It's on the way.
Yeah? Is it that much slower?
Oh yeah, we're considerably slower up here. I mean, we have to bring all.
You don't have as many people.
Well, I know. If we got like
sense.
1 month's supply from one state, we'd be done. Our whole country would be done.
You guys are like what, 30 million? Is that right? Is that
About 32 million. About 32 million people. Yeah.
Just hilarious because that's like the same thing as Australia. Australia is about 20 something million,
Right.
or whatever. It's like you're like it's the same size as the same ground area as the continental United States, but
Yeah, a little bigger,
less
in fact.
people than less people than Florida.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, we got to import ours from Belgium. Our entire supply is coming in from Belgium.
Which vaccine, guys? Are you doing the AstraZeneca one?
Yeah, we've approved 4. We've approved Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. Those are all approved.
You're like, give it to us. We don't care.
Yeah, well, especially
all.
we're like, come on, United States, you guys haven't approved AstraZeneca yet, and nobody wants it because everybody's afraid of the blood clots. So like, just
Whatever.
Give us the ones that are going to spoil.
Right. Yeah, it's been a little crazy around here. I'm going to be honest with you. I am not going to announce when I get my vaccine.
All right.
Okay, because I don't know. There's a lot of anxiety about it.
Sure.
Around here in particular, there's a lot of resentment that's going on from people who I know that they get it, and then people are like, how are you?
Oh, I see.
eligible?
Okay.
Dude, who cares? I mean, if you walk into a supermarket that has a pharmacy at the right time,
Exactly.
there might be a pharmacist who's just like, dude, these are going to go bad.
That's right.
Somebody let me stick you in the arm.
Absolutely. I am all for it. I really don't care the order. Let's just all get there as expediently as we can.
Right. And there was a week where my wife went crazy. Okay, and got on all these websites that were like, this is who's giving out to anybody. So if you can get an appointment here, blah blah blah. One Saturday morning, we sat in a car line for like an hour and a half, so that they could tell us that we weren't eligible.
Yeah.
Like, we know we're not eligible. That's not the point. The point is we heard that you were giving it to everybody. Like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. And she finally just settled down and said, okay, we're just it's gonna happen. It will happen. It's fine. We'll just keep on plugging on, and it'll be fine. So for those of you that have got it, congratulations. Yes. Thank you for taking it and not being one of the people who won't because the internet told them
and
something.
Please remember to get your second dose. Unless it's Johnson & Johnson that you got, but I don't think many people have gotten that.
I do know somebody who's gotten that. My brother-in-law got it. He works out in like the sticks of Florida sometimes. No, maybe all the time. I don't really know what he does. I don't know what he does. I know, but I don't care enough to remember. So I don't see him that often. But he was out in the sticks of Florida, and he was in a pharmacy, and they were like, "You want it?" Yeah. And he was like, "Yeah, I'm here.
I do.
Shoot me." So he got the one and done, the Johnson & Johnson.
Nice.
And I haven't even talked to him about it because I haven't seen him. But I haven't talked to him about how he felt. But I know a lot of people have gotten the Moderna and Pfizer's because those are around pretty regularly around here. So, if you've gotten it, great. If you haven't,
hang in there. Just keep doing what we've been doing for a year, and tough it out. We'll get there.
That's right. So I finally convinced my parent. Well, actually, I don't know if I convinced him or my wife convinced him, but it was probably my wife because she actually talked to him. I just fussed at him a couple of times and then stop talking to him altogether because that's my go-to move. But my parents have finally decided. My dad did get it. My mom is not getting it. My mom is eligible but won't get it. But she has had severe reactions to lots of vaccines and medicines in the past, so she's afraid.
That's legit.
Which is fine. you know, as long as everybody else who doesn't have those problems gets it, then herd immunity will still be achieved. So, you know, it's on the horizon. If you guys are stressed about it, I'm with you. Okay, we all are. So I know Rob over there is tapping his foot.
But all of my elderly relatives have at least had their first dose. A couple of them have had both doses now. So it's on the move, and yeah, a little bit longer. Yeah.
Pretty soon we're going to be changing that tagline at the end.
Counting down the days. Not sure how many though. Do we have to wait until both of us? Until both countries give the okay?
Well, really, it's that's the sad part, isn't it? That there's countries out there right now that haven't given a single shot.
This is it. I mean, we've got listeners all over the world, so I mean, maybe to be fair, we wait until basically the WHO says, "Hey, at least the vast majority of the world now open to travel back up." Maybe that's when we say it.
Right. I don't know. We're gonna have to come up with some yardstick by which to measure that, because you know it is. You're right. It's not really fair. You know. But let's get the podcast started, and then we can start talking about other stuff like that. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your AV and home theater questions. You can get your question answered by asking us on question@avrant.com. Just send us an email, question@avrant. That is how you get your question answered.
It is.
Unless we don't want to.
Pretty much. Email, please. Email us. You'll be on the podcast. That's pretty much it, unless it's like a pure clarification. What was that thing you said literally in the last episode? I might just shoot back that. But otherwise, question@avrant.com means you get on the podcast.
This is the first time I've done the podcast in here since I hung the panels.
Oh, yeah.
The art panels. Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's very distracting. Okay. I just keep looking at them. You can go to our website, avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant, where you can see our recording sessions and my eyes darting around the room as I'm looking at my new panels and very much wishing I had painted this room gray, which I will do. I did when I did a review of how the panels. I don't know. The panel review doesn't have a picture of them on the wall, maybe?
I don't know.
Anyways, one of them does have. I also did a how to hang the thing, because and I don't know if I published that yet, but I took a picture and like these walls are orange, but in the room they look like a burnt brick.
Okay.
You know, it's very dark orange, but that picture's making it's just like so bright orange. I'm like, but it's not the way my room looks. I swear to you, it doesn't look that way. But I can't think of a picture that's good enough. So that actually represents what it looks like in here. Let's see here. I did the YouTube. Do you want to contact us directly? It's rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's @firstreflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter's @avrant_Tom. I do read those emails. I don't always respond to them, but I do read them. So if you send them, I will often read them. But if you want your question answered, question@avrant.com. We want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, to support the podcast in some way, one of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com and clicking the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, which will send you to a PayPal donation site, app, something, I don't know. Anyways, we want to thank Don, Chris, and Paul for doing that this week. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Indeed, Don, Chris, and Paul, thank you very much for those PayPal donations. Really do appreciate that.
I feel bad sometimes when we have like 3 in 1 week, and then like the week before that we had none. I was like, you guys, could you just come in a couple days
when it happens.
You would have had the whole week for yourself. We want to thank our 124 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service where it's like a monthly subscription. You know, you subscribe to us through them, and they'll take some of the money that you choose to pay us through them from you and give it most of it to us. So thank you to our 124
Indeed. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anyone who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks very much to our 124 patrons over there. And hopefully in a moment soon, Skype will decide to let your video update so that you aren't just facepalming for the rest of this episode. But there you go.
Isn't that fun? Yep. Hold on a second here. I am hardwired, so I don't. Oh, I'm frozen on my own screen too. Look at that.
It's not just fun? My connection.
Look at that. That's great. This is another thing.
It'll go at some point.
That's the way I'm going to look for the rest of this podcast. You guys got to go to YouTube and see this, because this is not good.
Perfect.
Not a good look.
The perfect frame to freeze on.
Not. That's well. You know what? It'll probably be the thumbnail anyways, because that's the way I look for the entire time. Yeah. So if you support us in a way that's not financial, that where we can clearly see it, just let us know what you did, and so that we can mention you here. So Don, I'm guessing it's the same Don who
I believe so.
Don mentioned this to RBH when asking them about clearance prices on their signature SV reference speakers. Mitch bought some dual SVS SB2000 subs from their outlet store and a bunch of panels from GIK and mentioned us to both companies. I mentioned us to GIK.
Good.
They didn't. I think they'd be listening to me. Greg talked us up to Alan, the owner of HT Market, when he bought his recliners. These are our interviews where he learned about their seats and convinced him to give them a try. And we got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Joe, Don, who's a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, Mitch, Dan, Greg, and Jason. So thank you to all of you, gentlemen.
Indeed. I'll go back through the list here. Don, thank you for talking us up to RBH. Mitch, thanks for talking us up to SVS and GIK. Yeah, Tom, thanks for talking us up to GIK too. You're our permanent listener of the week. Greg, thank you for talking us up to HT Market and speaking to Alan over there.
Face-bombing?
What was that?
I'm still face-bombing.
You are still face-bombing.
I gotta check to see if I'm still face-bombing.
It'll clear at some point. And then, Joe,
Don,
not. Mitch, Dan, Greg, and Jason, thank you all very much for the notes of gratitude to us for keeping this podcast going. Even if Tom never moves again, we'll still keep it going. And that
it's just proof positive I'm an android, right? That's it. I'm actually an AI construct. And
which one of us that is the one that exists in the other one's head only? Somebody.
Yeah, that would be me. I'm Max Headroom.
You exist only in my head.
That's
and I have lost the concentration and ability to make you move.
That's right. Come on. Use that reality stone. All right, in the news, and this is huge.
It is.
Black Widow will be on Disney Plus via Premiere Access day and date with its new theatrical release, which is July 9th. The Marvel movie release dates all got pushed back a bit. Black Widow July, Shang-Chi. What? How come I can't say this right?
Shang-Chi.
Is it Shang-Chi? Shang-Chi. It's to September. Eternals to November. Spider-Man No Way Home to December. But for Black Widow, at least, Disney clearly doesn't feel confident enough that theaters will be back to full capacity. Cruella will also be a day-and-date release via a Disney Plus Premiere Access on May 28th. And Pixar's next movie, Luca, will be exclusive to Disney Plus on June 18th. Excuse me. They aren't even bothering with theaters with that one. It won't cost extra beyond your standard Disney Plus subscription for the Luca. But let's talk about
Black Widow. This was like the sign of all signs, right? We're like, if this ends up on Disney Plus at either instead of theaters or at the same time as theaters, that is the big sign.
Right. So the question you have to ask yourself is why. Okay. As and I think that our personal biases, at least mine, from being a United States citizen, is, we're looking around going, well, theaters are starting to open, people are getting vaccines, blah, blah, blah. But then we talk to people like Rob, we're like, it's coming out a lot slower. Or we talk to people in, I don't know, Uganda or something, where they don't even getting vaccines yet. So Disney is an international company.
Very much so.
They cannot think that just about the United States, even though we have a big box office and that can make a big difference, but they have to think about everybody else. And I really want to urge our listeners, if you are a person who would prefer to have the option to stream day and date or just stream first run movies instead of having to go to the theater, you should at the very least get Black Widow. I had been on the fence about all this stuff, and I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days, and I think that we need to send a message to Disney and to the studios and everybody else and say, hey, all these other movies you guys have been releasing, I have not been that excited about. Or they got bad reviews. Like the Tenet movie, and then there was the Bloodsport, or whatever, the Vin Diesel one, and Bloodshot, maybe. I
don't even remember.
It didn't get great reviews. Mulan didn't get great reviews, even though I saw it and I thought it was fine. I liked it fine. But I think that we should try to vote with our wallets here and let the studios know that this is something we want. And if a Marvel movie is something that you would like to be able to not have to sit in a theater full of people to see on day and date, because I don't. And in particular, my wife is starting to get interested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe again because of WandaVision, which she loved, and when she's kind of slogging her way through Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But I had to stop the thing like 5 times in a 30-minute episode. So she can ask me questions about who's that guy again?
There is a
this,
lot of backstory at this point. It is getting to the point of being like the comic books with 20 years of history.
I'm not even answering all the questions correctly. She asked me about something, and I was like, oh yeah, that's Zemo. He was the bad guy in Civil War, and I think he used to be a Hydra. I can't remember. So I went and watched it last night. I was like, man, I don't even know where this guy's from. He's from the same place, that the same made up country that Wanda's
Sokovia.
from. Sokovia. So he's from there, and I was like, well,
in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he is.
Yes, not in the other one. But, so being able to pause is going to be huge for me to be able to watch this movie with my wife. So if you are inclined, if you're like, no, I want it to be in theaters, I want to see things in theaters, then go to the theater. I think, if you're vaccinated or you're comfortable or whatever, go to the theater. But if you're not, or you just want to be able to say, hey, give me these movies at home, I think that's what you should do. That's what I'm going to do. I have to break the news to my wife, but I am planning on paying the $30.
I mean, if your whole family watches it, that is clearly cheaper than if you had all gone as a family and bought tickets. So
I can't wrap my brain around it, though, right? My whole brain is saying, I'm not spending $30 to rent a movie, right?
Right, okay.
But I'm perfectly fine.
Even if only you and your wife,
$15 a person for the five of us, plus popcorn, plus drinks, plus everything else. $120, $130, $150, $200 to go see a Star Wars movie when it comes out on Christmas. That's fine. But $30 to stream it? Duh. No, what am I, made of money over here? Apparently I am. So I just can't wrap my brain around it, but we have to. I think we have to if we want to have that convenience and luxury.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my personal feeling is that the way Disney has been doing this, I quite like, because I think the $30 price is pretty reasonable for a first-run big blockbuster movie like that. I mean, if just two of you see it together, that's really covering your ticket costs, let alone concessions.
Totally.
And then, on top of that, you pay that $30 once, and you can watch the movie as many times as you want. And then eventually it becomes free on Disney Plus. Well, like free with your subscription, right? So it's not a one-time payment, one-time viewing. You've basically unlocked it early, which to me is a pretty darn good deal.
You're going to make the argument, oh, well, what if I decided to drop Disney Plus? I'm like, well, when you went and saw Jaws in the theaters, you weren't going to see it again. Like, that was your one shot to see it, unless you paid again to go see it. So, the fact that you might someday lose access to it, well, yeah, that was the way it was going to work if you went to the theaters anyways, unless you went and bought the disc afterwards, which is what we all do, right? We go see Infinity War, and then when it comes out on disc, we're all like, woo, I'm buying it so I can see it again at home. It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Yep. So that's big news. And don't forget Cruella as well, because that is coming out end of May. So that's before Black Widow. So yep, the options are going to be there. And then our next news story kind of hints at how things might be going into next year.
I scrolled past it. Regal Cinemas / Cineworld reached an agreement with Warner Brothers for the remainder of 2021. Warner's movies will debut day and date in theaters and HBO Max, but starting in 2022, theaters will have a 45-day exclusivity window before movies show up on streaming. And you see, this is where I think that that's where I'm voting with our dollar, because the fear of the theaters is that if they allow day and date, they're going to lose.
Oh, revenue. They're gone. That's what the theater owners are fearful. They're fearful that if we have streaming day and date with theater release, they have no exclusivity window whatsoever. That spells the end. That is definitely what they're thinking.
I would give them a week. I think a week is enough money, because that's where they make 90%. Or not maybe 90%, but that's where they make a large amount of their money. I think that many of us are the types that are like, I'm not going to the theater, period. Like, it's not happening. Like, the last bunch of times I went to the theater was either for a Star Wars release, which is a family affair, and that has nothing to do with, whether or not it's on streaming or not. Or it's because I was voting with my pocketbook to say I want more movies like that. That was Wonder Woman, that was Black Panther, that was Deadpool. Those movies, I was like, I want R-rated superhero movies. I want more female-led movies, and I want more movies that include, I don't need there to be a white main character for me to identify with. I've identified with every main character ever. If the main character was
the story is what matters. You can have good stories and bad stories regardless of who the main character is.
Well, and like it's strange for me to say this maybe, or maybe even feel this, but my thought is I've had so many characters that look like me as the main character in a movie that I'm used to identifying with the main character, and now that I've done it for so long, it doesn't matter what they look like. To if it's a female, I'm still like, Wonder Woman, dude, we're kicking butt over here, me and you. Even though I have nothing in common with her, gender wise, or the ability to lift things up. But so yeah, have more people, give people more characters that they can identify with, so they can feel like I feel like. So that's me. So yeah, this will be interesting. There are, I can't remember, I read it, but there was a couple of cinema things where the day and the releases were being, the profits were being shared when it was streaming only during the pandemic, during the beginning of the pandemic. So that might end up where we're at too, where, okay, if you stream it from home in the first couple of weeks or whatever, the cinemas get a cut of that, which I would be fine with. I don't care how they do it. I just want to have the ability to see it at home. But then again, I have to start paying for it if I want to do that, and I haven't been. All right, Martin Logan introduced new in-ceiling speaker models that include their folded motion tweeters. The Electro Motion CI series is discontinued and replaced by the Motion XT CI series. Jesus,
that's what it's called.
What is it about the letters X, T, and C and little lowercase I that they love so much? It's like,
I mean, CI is custom install. XT is,
but it's going to be the CI Plus when they come out with an upgrade. You know that. So the new Motion CI series with optional retrofit back cans bring folded ribbon tweeters down to a similar price points as the Hilo series. Yeah. That was introduced several years ago. The 6-inch Motion CI go for $450 each and $500 for the 8-inch and angled models. The Motion XT CI only come in 8-inch for $900 each. Man, Martin Logan knows how to price some stuff.
Yep. Tom is still face-palming about it over here.
That's the appropriate reaction.
I think it's
to this.
Stuck forever.
I think it's going to be like this forever. I could try to turn my camera off and turn it back on.
I don't know if that'll do anything.
Let me do it. I'll do it. It's off.
Yeah. It's
and that's just going to be permanently off now.
Oh, man.
Well, at least I don't have to worry about picking my nose. Okay, so there we go. Now I can do that. You let me know if my show back up. Okay?
Oh, okay.
So that
let me see here. Let me put a logo in there for a moment.
Carl shared an ABX test of Spotify Lossless versus Lossy streaming quality over at abxdigitalfeed.net. Rob tried it out quickly and didn't do any better than Chance. I did it as well.
Oh, okay, good.
And I did it because this morning I was thinking about writing an article about Lossy versus Lossless, and I was wondering if there was anything to say about it that hasn't already been said. And so with that, and I don't know if I did the Spotify one or not, but yeah, there's people who are like, oh, I got, this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, whatever. I don't believe you most of the time, but I did one that I could tell the difference in the first song.
Okay.
Like I was 100%, like, and I could definitely hear the difference, whatever that stupid first song was. But the songs are just like Daft Punk was one of them. Like, ugh, I'm like, is there really gonna be that much of a difference here?
This is the question. This helps you determine if it's actually worth anything to you whatsoever. I mean, I do have to say, I didn't try this on my best speakers or on my best earphones. It was just pretty generic. So yeah, that was basically a coin flip for me doing it that way, and I wasn't really stressing myself over it because if I'm being honest, I press A, I press B, I press X, and I'm like, yeah, I can't tell any difference. So, but you must choose one to proceed. So that is what I did.
Right. So the first one I was 100% on that, but the other four, I was like 40% for one and 60%, 40% for two and 60% for the other two. So it averages out to basically me Chance there.
And I mean
this obsession.
Yeah, the one I did was the
ears.
Spotify HQ one. So that was at a minimum 256 kilobit AAC as the Lossy, and then Lossless as the comparison. So I mean, in my own testing, 256 kilobit AAC, I have rarely been able to detect differences. 320 never. So given that the minimum I was hearing was 256 AAC, I'm not surprised that I couldn't hear any difference.
Yeah. It was very, very hard. And like I said, I may not have taken the same test because I was doing
other ones that are 128, and those ones you can detect sometimes. Yeah.
Right. So I may have been doing that one. So I won't say that. I won't say that I could hear the 256. I don't know which one I did. Jonathan just celebrated his birthday. He's been wanting a smart speaker that works with Google Assistant, something with better sound quality than a Google Home. He read a whole bunch of reviews and wound up with a Bose 500. Bose 500. I burped. I was so upset by that. Sorry. Bose 500. Yep, Bose. $300. But all the reviews said it's good, better than Sonos. To be fair, his initial test did provide good audio quality. Then he discovered the fly in the ointment. He subscribes to YouTube Music as a streaming music service of choice. Google owns YouTube Music. It's the default music service on Google Home devices. He assumed any speaker that uses the Google Assistant would work with YouTube Music right away, but no, not the Bose 500. Bizarrely, YouTube Music is like one of the streaming services it doesn't support. Not a single review mentioned this. So if you're subscribed to YouTube Music Premium, it works on Sonos. Lesson. All right, well, there you go. That's stupid.
Just an FYI there. I mean, I wouldn't have checked because I don't subscribe to YouTube Music. So
right, that's why I didn't get mentioned in reviews because you're the only person that subscribes to it. YouTube's like, we got to keep it going because this dude, man, he won't let the subscription go. He streams all constantly. It's crazy.
So I guess the assistant is a separate thing from all other Google services, right? So that must be the reason.
I don't know. I do. I would like your feedback, Rob, and our listeners' feedback, if you guys will. If you've got opinions on what is the best device, home assistant device. All our Echo Dots are dying. Oh. Like they stopped connecting to the internet and they're being weird and stuff like that. I really do like She Who Shall Not Be Named. I like being able to add things to a shopping list and have it show up on my phone right away and everything else. So I do like it, and I might just stick with it. But if somebody's got an opinion about it, I would be willing to.
I mean, in the limited amount that I've used voice assistants, in terms of strictly home theater interaction, the Google Assistant has seemed to be better in my limited experience. But that was
if anybody else specific. Out there, let us know. Yeah. Byron finished his DIY TV stand and shared a few pics. Okay. It looks like a TV stand. Yeah, it looks very nice.
It does.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. It's got some... Oh, he used like metal pole things. What do you call them? Yeah, like pipes and pipe fitting things. Yeah, I've seen people do that before for like hangers in their closets and shelves in their living rooms and stuff like that. Your wiring is much better than mine.
Yes, although you will notice in the picture he has not yet put in speaker wire, which will add a whole additional spaghetti mess.
Right. Yeah, it's easy to keep him straight until you get that other thing. All right. Let's get to the questions here. George wanted to refresh his memory on how to set up a dual subwoofer, so he referred to Rob's 12-set guide and also Tom's Do I EQ dual subs separately on AV Gadgets, and now he's confused. Tom says to tell your AV receiver that you have two subwoofers, run your room correction, but only up to a point where it sets the levels for the two subs, then back out of the room correction and start over. But this time tell the receiver you only have one subwoofer and use a Y splitter. Yeah, that was my workaround. Meanwhile, Rob now says, after our Todd Welty interview, to only level match the two subs if you notice an imbalance. And if you do, then tell your AV receiver that you only have one sub, then physically unplug one sub 2, and then set the volume on sub 1, and then unplug sub 1, and set the volume sub 2, which of us is correct. It's kind of the same thing.
It is different ways of ultimately reaching the same end point. Tom's suggestion is in the event that you do not have an SPL meter. That's basically what it boils down to.
So what it came down to is when I wrote that article, I assumed that no one owns an SPL meter except for me, basically, because Radio Shack has been closed for years and all the good ones are gone. SPL meters that are of the right caliber are now like $30, $40 or something like that. They used to be $10 at Radio Shack, $15.
And we do have SPL meter apps on our phones. You can't be
they're not that good.
Too sure that it's giving. I mean, in terms of getting you like relative equal, you know, like the two
Right.
numbers read the same. It can do that, but you don't really know whether it's accurate to the decibel number that it's showing you. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. So my thought, sorry if you heard that, that was me being stupid. My thought process was I will tell people how to do it without having an SPL meter.
Sure.
And that's because I'm hoping that I'm going to reach a wider audience that way. But Rob's way and my way are basically the same way.
Yeah, so I mean, both of those were referring just to the step of SPL level matching if you need it. As I say, I actually changed my order and recommendation based on what we talked about with Todd Welty, because I think what he was saying was making sense that if you are in the rectangular room and the subwoofers are across the room from each other, that you don't attempt to just SPL level match them prior to everything, because the whole idea is that they're working in unison with the room, working together. But we've had like first-hand experience where sometimes you do that and it's like, no matter what I do, I can hear the imbalance in the SPL level where the subwoofer that's directly behind me just clearly sounds louder than the other, at which point you need to make some adjustments. So if we come at it that way and we're trying to SPL level match them, Tom's method is using what's built into your AV receiver. Now in that one, you're going to see that it sets different levels for the two subs, and then you're actually going to want to back out of everything, adjust the volume knob on at least one of the subs. The idea being that once you go through the setup of two subwoofers with your auto setup, that it's setting them to the same trim level. Now you know they are SPL level matched as far as the AV receiver is concerned. Once you know that, then you go ahead and run the entire thing. In my method, you do have to have some way of reading the sound pressure level, be that an app on your phone or a handheld SPL meter, or if you're using one of the room correction programs that gives you a readout prior to running all the other test tones, then that's a way to do it as well. But ultimately, we both end up with a single subwoofer output being used, a mono signal that is being sent to both of your subwoofers, and these are just two different methods of SPL level matching them.
Right. I just think, regardless how you do it, if the subs are like equidistant from each other, you're going to end up with them being the volume knobs on them usually being about the same anyways. So, Todd Welty's suggestion, I think ends up being a more academic one than anything else. It just,
it's what
can try it that way.
Works in the simulation, and then you get into the real room, and sometimes things aren't quite like the simulation, a little bit. So.
Right. Dwain was using an Epson 2150 projector on the white screen. Then, with the clearance prices being so attractive, he bought the Epson 5040 UB and also a gray screen. Okay, so he went from a 2150 on a white screen to an Epson 5040 on a gray screen. The black levels look a lot better, but the image seems dim and dark compared to what he used to have. He's thinking of going back to a white screen. He says he has decent light control in the room. Is it normal for the 5040 to look so dark compared to a 2150? What are our thoughts? Is the 2150 more of a business class? Or is that a home theater?
Not particularly, no. It is entry-level home theater, 1080p only. The specified maximum lumen output on the two models is the same. So it's not some kind of light cannon in comparison to the 5040 or anything like that. Because Epson does have some models that are way more lumens coming out of them than the 5040. But the 2150 is not that. Right.
So, I mean, it's just one of those things where you're like, you change two things and you don't know which were the things that are making the difference here. So, I would have not gotten the gray screen.
I mean, especially having upgraded to the 5040 UB, which by itself has way better black levels than your 2150 did. The 2150, even so, if you took the 2150 and put it on a gray screen and compared it to the 5040 UB on a white screen, the 5040 UB would still have better black levels. So I don't see the necessity for using a gray screen with the 5040 UB at all. I would definitely try going back to a white screen first and seeing if that does it. Now, the other factor of this is we don't know to what extent you have adjusted settings or calibrated. The 5040 UB, if you just put it in natural mode, out of the box, it is darn close. I mean, can it be made even better by a pro calibration? Yes, but out of the box, natural mode is darn close. Whereas the 2150, you got to work on that thing to get it accurate. And so the chances are you got used to a pretty darn inaccurate image with the 2150. Although I don't know, maybe you did, fully adjust it and have it calibrated. But given what you're describing, I have my doubts, and I'm thinking that it's a combination of, yes, that gray screen is definitely cutting down the punchiness of your image, so I would switch back to a white screen. And then, since the 5040 UB is pretty easy to get pretty darn accurate, you might just be like, oh, an accurate image is substantially dimmer than what I was used to with, out of the box 2150. Right.
That's a pretty common occurrence to have this happen. It's the same sort of situation, and I wrote a couple articles about it on AV Gadgets about, oh, my second sub killed my bass. You know what I mean? Like, you buy a second sub, you're like, well, everything got quieter in here. I don't understand. I'm like, yeah, evenness. It's fun. So yeah, changing stuff, you got to give yourself a time to adjust. And you got to make sure you have your settings right and everything else. And changing too many things at once can get very confusing for your brain and ears and eyes and everything else. So, Mick, this came from Facebook, which we don't normally do, but we made an exception for Mick because his name is Mick. And he's in Australia. So that's another reason we made an exception, because I like Aussies. So Mick has a bit of a Frankenstein system. We've all been there, dude. A while back, he bought an SVS PB1000. He's very happy with that. His front, left, and rights are a pair of Wharfdale towers with no immediate plans to replace them. He's been making do with cheap lowercase a, uppercase V, lowercase c.
That is how AVC they write it.
Center. AVC center and surrounds for 15 years, and they look a lot like Polks from just like. Look
a little bit like the low end
like Infinities. Infinities.
I was going to say JBL, but even more the lower end Infinities. You're right.
Yeah. So he's got a pair of in-ceiling speakers right above his seats for his 5.1.2 Atmos setup, and it's all powered by a Pioneer VSX 932 receiver. All right, let's go. His seats are almost on the back wall, which looks like it is either a sliding glass door or a big old window behind him.
He's got a big shade that is covering certainly some kind of windowed thing that is directly behind his seats.
So pretty good light control. Everything's white, although the walls are white, but the carpet is brown. So there's that. He's got carpet and his plush seats. So a sale came along, so he picked up a pair of Klipsch R41M bookshelf speakers. He can finally replace his surrounds with those. As shown in his photos, he mounted his old surrounds on his back wall, firing straight forward from the front wall. Should he do a straight swap with the new Klipsch surrounds, or should he redo the in-wall speaker wire so that his surrounds are on the side walls? The room is roughly 5 by 5 meters, with the main seats against the back wall and some extra seats facing sideways on the left wall. So they're on either side of his couch facing straight out, and I have no problems with you leaving them right there.
Okay.
And then instead of having them fire straight out, have them fire directly at each other.
All right, so buy some wall mounts that allow you to rotate.
A shelf.
Or a shelf. Install a shelf.
Yeah.
Or get wall mounts that allow you to rotate the speakers. And
I wouldn't move the wire. I think that's too much hassle just to put them on the side walls there. I mean, you could, but I don't see why. I don't think that sonically it's going to make much of a difference, because you're basically on that back wall. Anyway,
it's not as though this is a case where, them being on the back wall means that they're 5 meters behind you, and that's not where surrounds normally go. This is essentially, they're going to end up there anyway in terms of how far behind your seats they are. So, I'm in agreement that, it's obviously going to be some amount of hassle to rewire inside your walls to move them. So when we're just talking about orientation of the speakers, not actual placement, that makes all the sense. Leave the wires where they are. We're just going to mount your new ones a little bit differently, which ties right into his next questions.
So for his old speakers, he screwed directly into their cabinets to mount them on the back wall. Should you do that again with the Klipsch surrounds, or should you get some side clamping wall mounts? I really do think you should just get a shelf. Put them on the shelf and call it a day. You've got nothing else on the walls in this room. There is, even if you got shelves that were bigger than what you really needed, then you could put other stuff up there too, like figurines or something. I would just do a shelf. I think it's easiest. I think you don't risk damaging your speakers. You make it easier to resell them later if you want to do that, or pass them along, and you don't have holes in them, creating little itty bitty ports. I definitely wouldn't screw directly into the cabinets.
I certainly wouldn't do that. I totally agree with Tom. If for some reason just nope, there is no way I'm going to put a shelf on my walls, then yes, the side clamping wall mounts I would be totally fine with.
And for your old speakers, once you get them off the wall, if those if they did drill, if you drilled directly into them and there's a hole that goes all the way into the interior of the cabinet, I would reinstall that screw right back into where it was, so that you don't have that port. Fill it up with
that, that fake wood thing that you use to cover in nail holes, something.
Yeah, but I mean, I depending on, if you started using them, if you wanted to use them in a different, and you turned them up loud, I could just see
whistle.
I could just see the like the wood filler just go pop out, and all this, it's like, what is that noise? And then why does it sound weird? Well, that's why. So I think the easiest thing would just be to get some wood filler or something like that, and then screw the thing back in there and call it a day. For his old speakers, I already did that. He wants to upgrade his center speaker next, since he just got these Klipsch Reference Series surrounds. Should he get the Klipsch R52 center? Should he save up a lot more for a SVS Ultra center? So as surrounds, I have no problems with you mixing and matching, but once you start talking about the center or the front three speakers, you're going to start running into some timbre matching issues. And I've talked about this on AV Gadgets. We've talked about on this podcast a lot as well. But the timbre match of Klipsch speakers is not something that is universal. You can't just take a Klipsch and mix it. You can't even mix it with another horn-loaded speaker necessarily.
No, they've got their own sound. Yeah, I mean, if he had said earlier on that he also plans to upgrade his Wharfdale towers at some point, and the whole idea is to get to an all Klipsch system, I'd have no problem with that. But he said right at the beginning that he doesn't intend to upgrade his Wharfdale towers. So to me, I'm like, can you find out what Wharfdale has to offer in a center? Because that would be my number one.
The SVS should be pretty neutral. I don't know that you have to go all the way to an Ultra. I mean, it sounds like you want to, in which case you should be telling yourself, I want to upgrade my front three speakers and I want them to be Ultra bookshelves and Ultra center, in which case I would say, okay, fine. And then if there's some timbre mismatch, you just kind of live with it until you get enough money for the bookshelves. But Wharfdale would be the way to go if you can find one. But if you're really wanting to get a new center, you could go with the Prime center as well.
For sure.
I don't see any reason why that would be a problem in this room.
And I did just want to mention, since we have the image, you can improve upon your current center's performance by, I would put it on your top shelf, because you've got room in between the top of your TV stand shelf and your television. It's not as though your television is right down against the top of your...
And now that you have shelves at the back of your room, you can take whatever that junk is on top of your...
Top
of
put in some
TV
bigger
stand
shelves on the back wall,
shelf.
move it back there. So you could put your center speaker on the top there. That would help. If you refuse to do that, definitely bring it forward, because in the image, at least, that he sent, it is recessed back into his TV stand, and that is not doing your center speaker any favors. So that is something you could do without spending any money.
And I don't know if you did this for us, taking the grills off and stuff like that, but if you have any concerns about speaker grills making a difference in your sound, you can reinstall those if you want. He says, would it be worth saving up for a second PB1000?
Possibly.
Well, is this an enclosed room?
I don't know. I can't
doesn't look
see
like
the
it, I'll
entrance.
be honest with you. It kind of feels like it's got a hallway
or a permanent opening somewhere on the right-hand side. I mean, we can see the left-hand side is closed in, but I don't know what's happening on the right-hand side.
It looks, I can't tell if this, no, that's okay. So if you wanted to do, if this is an enclosed room, which we can't tell if it is, then you've got your sub in your front left corner and you've got a table at your back right corner. So you could just get rid of that table, put the second sub there, and Bob's your uncle, and that would be fine. And I think that would be good too. That would be a good way to do this. But if it's not enclosed, then we have to start talking about whether or not you're actually having bass issues and if we cannot fix them. I mean, you've got places in this room where you can place subs. Yeah. Right? The front left corner is definitely one. It looks like there's, I don't know what that is. I think that's a flight simulator set up in his back left corner. That can be moved and a sub could be put there. Look at it though. It's got like a steering wheel and like a joystick thingy. It looks like a whole stand thing for playing specific games.
Maybe. I do not know for sure.
Yeah, it's a little strange. Anyways, so if you're having bass issues and you and it's an open room, open to the rest of the house, I would definitely try the 3 spaces you definitely have space to put the sub, which would be front left, back right, and see which is the best of the 3.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a fair number of seats in here. So, I mean, what we can say is with a single subwoofer, the likelihood of you having uniform response across all of your seats, you've got at least 5 seats in here. That is very, very low, the chances of that being uniform with a single seat. So if you care a lot about the performance in all 5 of your seats, the chances that a second subwoofer will help at least give you the chance of helping achieve better uniformity across multiple seats goes way up. So from that standpoint, a second PB1000 could definitely be a help.
Right. Lastly, he asked he'd love to have 4 Atmos speakers. He's pretty sure his Pioneer can't do 4 overheads though, right? And I tried to look at it real quick, but the link I've got here doesn't tell me.
That is the case. Your Pioneer VSX932 tops out at 7 speakers total. So you cannot go beyond 7 speakers, and that would be 5.2.2. It does not have additional pre-outs. It just has the 7 pairs of speaker binding posts.
I don't know where you are in Australia, but every time I ever went into like one of those West Coast electronics or the different hi-fi stores they have around there, they always had a wall of like return speakers that you could pick up, so on discount. So I really feel like you shouldn't be limiting yourself to like anything. And if you do put shelves back there, and you end up not liking the clips, you have made it very easy for you to swap out speakers to something else. That is very true. Which is a great benefit, and I would highly recommend it. So yes, even this receiver issue can be solved with that. But the fact that you've got 2 overheads. I really want to steer you towards SVS because you've got the 2 overheads that are right above you, and then your only really other option for Atmos speakers are front heights. So you've got top, middles, and front heights, which is what I
theoretically he could install another pair of in ceilings, but.
Right. But, you could do the elevations. It would be very easy to do. Running speaker wire in that wall just up from the ground is not hard. I want to steer you in that direction, but like I said, if you can pick up stuff, Frankenstein it up, I think there's nothing wrong
and to
with
be
that.
fair, Klipsch does have wedge-shaped speakers too, so
that's true.
That is
I'm
not
right.
out of the question. If you end up all Klipsch, you can do the wedge-shaped things,
and that would be fine as well. Yeah, that would be fine as well. Your room needs room treatments, like really badly. So this room has got a bunch of very white walls with nothing on them except for speakers and a single picture. So I would highly, if you're asking me what I think you should do, I think you should buy room treatments or make some room treatments before you do any of the other stuff.
I'm not 100% against the center speaker at some point though, because the one that he has is very entry level and probably not keeping up.
Right. I would be okay with that, but I think that you will get the most benefit from having some room treatments. Don says, a while back we recommended a Rhythmic FV15 HP for Don's wide open room. The theater area is 20 feet by 28 feet with 10.5-foot ceilings, but it's open to 3 other rooms in the hallway, so lots of air to displace and a sizable seating distance. He's used a pair of legacy audio focus speakers for over 20 years. Performance-wise, they're great, but his wife has never been a fan of having such huge speakers, so now it's time for something more normal. Tell her to give up a bedroom. You go shove it all in a bedroom, and you get a lot of small stuff. Sure, the NHT speakers and said, if you give me this bedroom, I won't buy anything bigger than this. But don't tell her about the subs. But anything bigger than this, and you can get the SVS SB1000s and Pros and shove them in the corners and Bob's your uncle. They don't have to be tiny, but they've got to be smaller than the legacy Focus towers. The height is actually one of the bigger concerns, so something with the tweeter at the top of the cabinet is likely going to work best. But they still need to contend with his large space. The budget is as much as $5,000 for a pair. Should he just get a smaller legacy model, or what speakers can we suggest? I'm going to always point, in this case, I'm going to always point you towards RBH. Yep. RBH is I would give them a call and say, this is what I've got. And remember, as far as filling the space, these are direct radiating speakers. They are firing directly towards your listening area, and they just have to get the sound there. They don't have to get it to the rest of the house, unless you really want them to get it to the rest of the house. In which case, you have a problem, sir. That is
to be fair, though, when in that crossover region between your subwoofer, which he has said is handling his space just fine, and yeah, the FV15 HP from Rhythmic, that's one of those subs that can handle the large space. But in that region, upwards of about 300 hertz, the speaker is responsible for that. And you are dealing with the volume of air in that bass. We might call it the upper bass, but the speaker is responsible for that. So it's not completely trivial and unimportant what the speakers themselves can do in the bass. The really, really low bass, we leave that to the sub, but the bass starts at 500 hertz. So from there down to 100 hertz, you do have to make some considerations. But I'm in total agreement, RBH, especially since right now they're basically selling off the last of their signature SV reference. So, for example, I mean, I wouldn't go for the towers because the towers are not going to visually appear much smaller than the legacies that you have. Those are some big towers in the signature SV reference series. But I love their big bookshelf model, which is the 661R, and they're selling those off for $950 each right now, which is like a 30% discount from what they normally cost. Now, the thing is, that is an MTM design, so standing on its stand, it will definitely look smaller than your current speakers because it is less than half the width, and then you can have a nice, narrow, skinny stand, and visually that is going to be smaller. But height-wise, there is about 10, 11 inches above the tweeters, so you're going to end up with the height of the speaker about, 46, 47 inches or something like that off the ground, which isn't very different from the legacies. So you said height in particular is a concern. They do have, of course, the smaller SV61R, which is just the tweeter and woofer. But there, those are going for about $700 each. But there, I do start to get into, that bass region when you've just got the single little woofer pumping away. I question a little bit. So there might be some other ones to look at. Another one that came immediately to mind was Martin Logan, and not the electrostatics, although if you want something that looks dramatically different, you could consider their electrostatics, but their motion series, particularly the 40i, which goes for $1,200 each. Well below your budget mark, but if, that would keep with that folded ribbon tweeter. They are a much slimmer, smaller, sleeker looking design, and they have pretty darn good efficiency and power handling that would be capable of contending with your room. So those Martin Logan Motion Series 40i towers are one I would look at. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm just looking at some of these links that you've got here. I'm not showing the sale prices on these.
No, you have to call them. You have to call RBH.
Oh, you have to call them.
That's RBH. Okay. Because, I mean, normally they don't sell direct with their signature series, but this is basically clearing out what they've got. Where, I mean, we have to anticipate they went under new ownership, right? We know that. That was like over a year ago now. So we haven't seen anything from a new impression series. They're clearing out what they have of their signature reference series. So I have to imagine there's something in the works. But we don't know yet. Yeah, either that or they're just going out of business. Hopefully not.
Yeah, well, this is a tough time for a lot of people.
It is.
They finally got that boat unstuck from the Suez Canal,
right.
So that's good, I guess. That was fascinating.
I think.
To be honest with you, I was kind of riveted by that whole thing. I was like, and it's one of those things where you're like, I'm not even mad at anybody. It's like it wasn't like the dude was drunk and like drove into like a beach or something. I mean,
I don't know what happened. Wasn't it?
Well. There was a strong wind and a big old boat, and the boat was counter steering into the wind so it could make it through this small passage, and then the wind died. So it just crashed into the wall because it couldn't correct in time. I mean, what are you gonna do? Whose fault is that? But it's shut down.
Put some bumpers on there like a bowling lane. But so. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of some other speaker ideas, I mean, I would look at Focal. They actually do carry those over at Accessories for Less, which helps with the price because, like, to get the beryllium tweeters that I used to really love in their Electra BE series, which is unfortunately discontinued now you got to go all the way up to their Canta series, which is expensive. So they do have their aluminum magnesium tweeter design. They're using that in their Aria series, but even the Aria series series. I'm like, God, that's a little pricey at the normal prices that they're asking, at least in my opinion. But getting them from accessories for less, for example, the 936 towers in the Aria series, very nice design there. And from accessories for less, they sell them at $2,000 each, which is certainly pricey, but it's within the budget that he specified. So that's one you could certainly look at. And then Revel. Revel might kind of break the budget, because I was thinking here, like, who else sells a beryllium design at a somewhat attainable price point? So their Performa BE series over at Revel, they've got their F226 BE. That's the smaller of the two tower models, but it would contend with this room size. But $3,500 each. So suddenly we've broken the budget by $2,000, which kind of puts it out of the running. But I would mention it as a if you find them refurbished or used or something.
I bet if part of the problem here is the wife, which I believe that's the case. I think if you show her those SV661s, from RBH, and you get a stand, and put some museum putty underneath it, to stick it to the stand basically, and acoustically dampen it. I think you're going to find that that's going to be a pretty good option.
That's my first choice. Because I think I understand her saying, part of the problem is the height, but I'm like, it's because it's the same uniform wide width of the legacy speakers that you have all the way up. I think if it's less than half the width and not even that width the entire way down, that visually it just changes it so much that it isn't maybe truly like where the top of the speaker rests in your eye line. It's like having this big rectangle monolith that you've got right now.
Or just tell her, give me a bedroom, I'll take everything out of here. You could have the whole room back. You'll do whatever you want with it. I'll take everything out, and we'll put it in. I'll sell the big subwoofer. I'll sell these big speakers. I'll buy a bunch of small stuff, and we'll put it all in one room together. So that's the other option. Chris just bought 2 pairs of Ascend HTM-200SE speakers for surround. Why don't you recommend those more, Rob? No. You never talk about those. And surround backs, they'll go with his Ascend Sierra 2 speakers up front. You haven't talked about those in a while too. So clearly you no longer like Ascend. I don't know what's up with you. When installing them as surrounds, does the orientation matter? They have a nested array design with a tweeter offset and in between the 2 4-inch woofers. So he's read that their vertical and horizontal dispersion is limited a little bit. Should he turn them horizontally for the widest horizontal dispersion? What? No. What?
It's talked about a little bit. So
I need to look at these speakers.
Yeah, you imagine that you got these 2 4-inch woofers, and then not directly in the middle of them, like offset to one side. That's the tweeter. So it's got that kind of.
Oh right, I've had speakers like this before with Vance Dickinson.
Yes,
makes them like this all the time.
Right.
So you want so if they're on the left and rights, you want the tweeter to be inside,
on the insides
usually. Yeah. So but you can flip them. I'm not seeing any reason why you couldn't flip them horizontally, but I would only do that in the case of a center channel. I don't see any reason to do it otherwise. Yeah,
so what happens is basically on the side where the 2 woofers are, the dispersion in that direction, the dispersion, like if you imagine the tweeter going towards the 2 woofers, the dispersion in that direction is limited a little bit. So that's why if they were front, left, right speakers, you'd have the 2 woofers closest to your sidewalls and the 2 tweeters on the insides. But for your surrounds, oh man, honestly, it just doesn't really matter.
I would probably put, for the actual side surrounds, I would probably put the tweeter towards the front of the room.
Yeah, that's about
rather than the back of the room. And then in the surround backs, I would have them just like your left and right speakers.
Yeah,
so
tweeters on the inside.
On the inside.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother with turning them horizontally, and
Yeah, I don't see. This is one of those things where we're going to tell you what we think you should do, and I guarantee you that if you flipped them any direction, you'd be like, they all sound the same to me.
It really would. As surrounds, you're just not going to notice. It's just not going to be noticeable.
It's so bad because I know people are going to listen to this podcast and hear us saying, I couldn't really hear a difference between those, the Lossy files. Oh, these guys don't know anything about high-end audio. Like, I was listening to mine on an outboard DAC that I have plugged into my computer that I reviewed a million years ago, and they never asked for back. And planar magnetic headphones. Don't tell me that I didn't have the opportunity to hear the difference. And I was listening. I was pressing the AP button back and forth, going, I don't even think these buttons work.
If you can tell between 320 kilobit and lossless, then okay.
Oh yeah, sure you can.
Well, I like that test. You'll find out.
So the ideal side surround placement seems fairly clear, either directly to the sides of your seats or just slightly behind, but the surround backs are more confusing if you're going by Dolby's diagrams and instructions. First, don't go by their diagrams. The diagrams are awful. They always have everything. Yeah. They always have everything angled directly at the person's head. Plus, the diagrams have the surround backs heavily towed in. Okay, whatever. I should have just kept reading. Heavily towed in, so they're aiming directly at the middle seat. So what's the ideal for surround backs? Surround backs should be in line with your front, left, and right speakers and facing directly into the room. I have an article on this.
Assuming that your front, left, and rights are arranged as they should be. Because, for the front, left, and rights, go by the angles that are given, which is plus or minus 22.5 to plus or minus 30 degrees to your left and right. And I am not one of the people who's like, oh, try and spread them as wide as you can for the widest soundstage. I'm like, nah, you want them to... I err closer to the 45-degree spread, the plus or minus 22.5 degrees. I err closer to that because that tends to put them basically beside your display if you're going for a 45-degree field of view. So once you have your front, left, and right speakers with appropriate spacing, then yeah, you can basically draw a straight line to your back wall, and that is where your surround back speakers would be the same width apart as your front, left, and right. However, you can go by the angles that are listed, which is anywhere from plus or minus 30 to plus or minus 55, isn't it? Right? Because it's 135 to 155.
I don't even, my surround backs aren't in line with my main speakers because there's a door.
Yeah.
I can't, that's in my bathroom. I can't do anything about it. So, what am I going to do? Put it on the door? I mean, it's not going to work. So, yeah, you just do, if you've got the option, this is how you want to do it. If you don't have the option, it's really not going to make that much.
Okay, yeah, they do plus or minus 135 to plus or minus 150. So yeah, it's between a 30 and a what is that, 45 degree spread.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
But
what they
say you're like that Australian Mick guy, right? He's got this massive couch.
Yeah.
Right. If he wants everybody to be within the speakers, between the front, left, and right speakers, he's got to put them very far wide. Sure. But that might not work, or whatever. So you kind of do what you can do, and you don't worry too much about it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to basically, like, in real world terms, right? If I'm setting up a room, I tend to, on my front speakers, I tend to air closer to the plus or minus 22.5 degrees. And I mean, then I go with what makes sense, right? If I've got some little obstruction or something like that and they got to be wider than that, fine, right? But I try to stay within those angles for the fronts. And then at the back, I tend to start with the surround backs. I'm like, okay, where is plus or minus 30 degrees from straight behind, right? So, or what they would call plus or minus 150 degrees if you're starting at 0 at center. I start with that and I kind of take a look at that and I go, okay, does it make sense for them to be a little wider apart, maybe even a little closer together? I'm okay with that. Live in the real world, but I sort of start with that angle as my beginning point and then do what makes sense for the room within that. And as long as they end up reasonably close to the same width apart as the front, left, and right, then you're all within tolerance.
Yeah. So for the HTM-200SE specifically, since the tweeter is sort of in the middle of the speaker cabinet, how high should he wall mount them? His ceilings are 9 feet, and he'll have 4 Atmos speakers, little focal birds mounted in the top front and top rear positions. Again, my article that we will link up talks about this, but it's all about the tweeter height and how well it sees your ears. So however high that is. But if at all possible, you want to have 5 feet separation, physical distance between every speaker.
Sure. Yeah.
Basically, you don't want any speaker except for maybe the center to be any closer than 5 feet from another speaker.
But we would expect that your top rears would be the closest speaker on your ceiling to your surrounds. So yeah, if you got 5 feet in distance between the tweeter of your top rear and the tweeter of your surround, then you're doing just fine. And yeah, the tweeter of your surrounds. So let's say your surround right on your right hand wall. That tweeter should have a clear line of sight to your leftmost seat, and then vice versa. The surround left should have a clear line of sight to your rightmost seat. So depending on what your seating is, that might move them a little higher or lower, but. Yeah, I mean, you can basically get up on a ladder and and have yourself a look, and that's where your tweeter is going to go. It just has that line of sight to the far opposite seat.
Right. And in the end, if you need to cheat it down a little ways because of, you want to keep it away from another speaker or something like that, then that's what you do. It's fine. He asked what wall mount do we recommend for the HTM-200SEs. He'd like to as close to a flush mount as possible, but a little bit of adjustment capability makes sense to him. So I wrote the article, best speaker mounts for walls or ceilings. I will link that up. It has a lot of options, including the one that Rob's going to recommend.
Yeah, the one I always go to for those are the Video Secu side clamping wall mounts, and we credit our listener Daz for first-hand experience saying, yeah, you just can take the base that has the 2 side clamps on it and turn that around 180 degrees so that now the clamps are towards the back of the speaker instead of towards the front of the speaker, and that gets it much closer to the wall. And he used them specifically with HTM-200 SEs. So we know this works, and we know it gets them close to the wall, and you can definitely angle and pivot the speakers however you choose with those side clamping Video Secu wall mounts.
Yeah. Dylan is finishing his basement. He's trying to finalize his speaker placement so that he can complete his in-wall wiring. The room is about 36 feet wide. Jeez. 12 feet front to back. The theater area will take up the left half. So 12 by maths, 18.
Roughly.
Yeah, the theater area will take up the left half, so it's wide open on the right. Finished ceiling height will be 7 feet 10 inches. So no basketball players. He wants an 85-inch TV and plans to sit 10 feet away, so he'll be close to that back wall. But there's a bit of space, about 1.5 feet to 2 feet, I guess,
behind his seats.
Says.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't understand why you're sitting so far away, but okay. He's going for Emotiva's B1 Plus and C1 Plus speakers as the main 5. He figures he can wait until the room is closer to finish before buying the subs, receiver, and TV, since new models might get announced and prices always come down. What matters right now is finalizing speaker placement so he can pull wires. He intends to have a fairly wide seating arrangement with a couch plus a separate chair. With the fairly short distance front to back of this wider seating plan, he ended up with the front left and right speakers at plus or minus 30 degrees. Do we agree this makes the most sense? So I'm taking a look at it now.
Indeed, yeah. So here we go. Here's an example very related to what I was just talking about of, you got to live in the real world, and you got to, you have your starting point, but then you adjust within the Dolby guidelines to something that makes sense. Now, I mean, if that is to scale, and I'm not sure that it is, but if it is to scale, certainly what he's proposing in his diagram, where basically his front left speaker is more or less in line with the left armrest of his the full width of his seating area, and then the front right speaker is a little bit outside of the chair that's on the right, but that's equaling the angles on either side of the TV, and that looks completely reasonable in this setup to me.
Yes. What is that blue box? Is that supposed to be the sub?
Yeah, it might be the sub, or it might just be an end table sitting in between the couch and the chair.
If it's a subwoofer, don't put it there. Okay. So for his surround, since he basically doesn't have a right side wall, he figured he would mount both surrounds to the back wall using wall mounts that allow him to swivel the speakers so they aim towards the middle of the listening position. Some Ford people have suggested bipole surrounds mounted on the back wall instead. What do we think would be best? Again, we don't. Bipole speakers and dipole speakers are unfortunately a relic of the pre-Atmos age, and now that we have Atmos, we don't recommend.
And I mean, we should be clear: we were all on board with bipole.
I owned them
speakers prior, so it's we can't blame anybody for considering them. But yeah, we don't recommend them any longer now that we've got these object-oriented formats and they work with monopole speakers best. That's what we recommend, and I definitely wouldn't mount trapezoidal bipoles flush on your back wall when you've got a left wall exceedingly close to the surround left speaker and then essentially no right wall. It totally doesn't make sense to be using bipole or dipole speakers mounted on the back wall there.
Yeah.
So
I also wouldn't have them aimed at my head. I don't care what Dolby stupid diagram.
Oh, I mean, again, you could have little shelves on the back wall or the side clamping wall mounts that let you rotate them, and you aim the 2 surround speakers at each other. So, I mean, they'll be firing like basically, right along your back wall, but they're aimed at each other and then just mounted on the back. I have no problem with what he's proposed of mounting them on the back wall. That makes sense when your right side wall is way over there. So yeah, mount them on the back wall, but just you put a little shelf on the back wall or get the side clamping wall mounts that let you rotate them and just face each other.
Yeah. If he keeps his Atmos speakers in line with the front left and right, they'll end up almost directly above the surround speakers on the back wall. Similar to his front speakers, this keeps the Atmos speakers to the outside edges of his wider seating area. But is that the best placement? should they maybe be a bit closer together and farther away from the surrounds? The answer is yes. They should be far closer together and farther away from this is one of those things where you're like, I had to put these speakers here because of other things. But yeah, the overhead speakers, you would cheat those in to get them away from your surrounds, and then you'd call them top middles. Because
they're basically right above your seats at that point.
Yeah, they're going to be right above your seat anyway. So and then that's what I would.
Yeah, and I might move, like, again, if this diagram is to scale, I might have the ones that you've installed as top fronts. I might scooch them forward just a little bit more, not way more, but a little bit more, a foot or two farther forward, because you're going to be labeling them as front heights. Do not worry that you're like, oh, but the angle is a little bit more than 45 degrees, the elevation angle. That's fine. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is front to back, left to right, and that'll still work. But you'll be labeling them as front heights, and as they're drawn in the diagram, it kind of looks like they'd be firing directly above your foot if you kick your foot out, and that's a little bit close for even top fronts. So I might scooch the top front ones forward a little bit.
Okay. I agree with that. I mean, they're clearly not 5 feet apart, so that's the other thing that you should consider. Gosh, I have to scroll back down. Does it make sense to have top rear so close to the back wall? Should he maybe stop at 5.1.2 instead of 5.1.4? They're not top rears. They're top middles, because that's what they are.
I mean, again, you can label them top rears. It's really not going to make much of a difference, because the object steering just goes front to back, left to right. But I mean, I would still have 4 if you can afford and you can do 4. I would do 4, because otherwise you got no front to back steering.
Yeah. So he's thinking he saved money on the in-ceiling Atmos speakers, Mica 8Cs. They're $45 each.
I wouldn't get those. I wouldn't get them.
I mean, we've had some bad experience with. Or I guess not experiences, but bad reports of those speakers. So we don't generally. Let me see. I actually have an article on that too. I think. But yeah, and it involves monoprice. Monoprice is kind of your go-to.
I mean, so that's $90 for a pair, right? So for $100 a pair, which I don't think is going nuts, you can get the monoprice Alpha in-ceiling speakers, and that's where I would point you. Because it's not tremendously more expensive, and experience and anecdotally together that they're going to perform considerably better. So that's where I would point you. Also, we want you to have backer boxes, back cans, and you can get the metal back cans for the Monoprice Alpha series. I mean, you can make backer boxes. This is a basement setup, so you can make backer boxes if you did end up with the Micas, but it's just easier when you can buy them. So those are $65 a pair for the metal back cans for the Monoprices, and I would go ahead and do that. It's a one-time cost expense. It's not crazy, and I think it's worth it.
Joe says his Onkyo receiver, from 2006 has died. I felt like that guy in the Princess Bride. The pit of despair. Don't even think.
Whenever somebody tells me that their AV receiver has died, I'm like, did it actually die? Well,
with the Onkyo, it might have exploded. That's true. And caught on fire.
I'm often like, are you just itching for an upgrade and you accidentally wired 2 things together?
I've done that, not on accident though. I left the receiver on as I was switching speaker wire on, and on the Onkyo. It was an Onkyo receiver as well, and the 2 wires touched, which I've never had a problem with before, and it blew out the channel. That was before protection circuits were a thing. Anyways, Joe killed his Onkyo receiver so he could upgrade. $500 is his budget, and 7 speakers, 5.2.2 is fine. His current TV is a 60-inch Samsung something or other from 2015. It was an entry-level 4K model at the time, but at 60 hertz and doesn't do HDR of any kind. Still, it'd be nice if the receiver is ready to handle all the new video stuff in case he upgrades his TV at some point, so we would recommend. Well, how many 4K HDR sources are you planning on having? Because if you're planning on having anything more than 1, you got to buy a Yamaha, and it's $500 ain't going to do it.
Well, so, you can get pretty darn close if your Costco gets them back in stock. Because actually, so at one point, so we're talking about Yamaha's, okay, normally it is called the RXV6A. That is the 7-channel model that they have that has, I believe it's 3 HDMI 2.1 inputs, although they still haven't delivered the promised firmware to activate VRR and 4K 120 pass-through, so who knows if it'll ever happen. But it's one of the shots that you have, but there is a model of it, just a renaming of that very same model, that is Costco exclusive. So that's the TSR 700. Now, at one point, it was selling for as low as $400. The normal price on that model is $550. So it's not completely out of the question that you might be able to find that. If you are looking for the RX V6A, that one goes for $600. So it's a saving at Costco, even if you're only getting the $550 price. It's the exact same receiver from Yamaha. It's just the Costco exclusive model at a lower price. So that is a possibility. That is certainly one to keep an eye out for. It would do all the things that you're talking about for pretty darn close to your budget, especially if the Costco price is $500 or lower. If you're going to go Denon, then I think the X1600 probably makes the most sense. It does not have any HDMI 2.1 ports whatsoever, but it does support eARC. So if you have any video sources that actually need the HDMI 2.1 stuff, you can plug them straight into what would end up having to be a new television and then rely on eARC to get the audio signal back to the AVR X1600. So you can find those on Amazon for $530. At Best Buy, they're $650 brand new for the X1600. And then over at Accessories for Less, they do have the X2600 for $600, but out of stock right now. So yeah, it's going to probably be the X1600 or the Yamaha at Costco.
Okay. In a 5.2.2 Atmos configuration, will he need to use an external 4K source in order to play back Atmos content? Can a regular HDMI ARC on his Samsung JU640, whatever it is, pass through Atmos or deliver Atmos from its built-in apps? I'm sure the answer to this is no, because it probably doesn't have an enhanced ARC.
Yeah, well,
because it's older.
Yeah, just to make the distinction, HDMI ARC, audio return channel, just the regular version, not the enhanced version, it can have the capability on a technical level of sending Dolby Digital Plus with an Atmos extension. So there are televisions with built-in, say, Netflix app where you can get Dolby Atmos from the built-in Netflix app via just regular audio return channel, because that's Dolby Digital Plus with an Atmos extension. So on a technical level, HDMI ARC can do a version of Atmos, but your specific Samsung, your JU6400, cannot. It can do 5.1 Dolby Digital, it can do 5.1 DTS, but that is it. Its built-in apps will not go beyond that. You won't get Atmos from its built-in apps, and you can't pass through an external source with Atmos, pass it through your Samsung. So yes, you would need an external source. We're joking around because Tom's video looks like it kind of came back.
I fixed it.
All right.
I did.
Let's switch it back. Cameras. Get the logo off your face. There he is. No longer face palming. There you go. We can see Tom again. So sorry about the slight distraction, but yes. The final answer is your current Samsung is not going to be passing through or sending out Atmos of any kind.
No. All right, I'm sorry. I've been trying to get over to the app, to the Skype window, so I could do it, but we've been talking too much. So, and I just flipped it back and forth until I finally got the camera to re-engage. But I'm now you get to see me sitting in here sweating because I'm. It's like
now I got to worry about the lip sync again. Darn it.
Oh well. But you could edit the video. So
I know. I'm joking.
You got all that black space. Okay. Anyway, Stan, we mentioned how the majority of Floyd Tool's speaker listening tests were conducted with a single speaker in mono. There are whole research papers dedicated to explain why this methodology was used, and some review websites have taken all of that to heart and rely upon mono listening tests with a single speaker for detecting and describing differences between speakers. But of course, that's not how the vast majority of people would ever use those speakers at home, so Stan feels a bit confused. It makes perfect sense that comparing one lone speaker to another lone speaker would be helpful in picking up differences, But is that really meaningful and useful for a typical shopper? What's our take? So if your goal of your test is to describe the differences between two individual speakers, that is what you have to do.
Pretty much.
And there is no other way to do it. But in my experience, it is, that is only part of the picture.
Yeah.
The whole picture is not how does this speaker compare to another speaker. That just tells you what the differences are. Not even really the similarities that much. It's just where the differences lie. But how do a pair of speakers work together to create a convincing soundstage? How well do the pans work back and forth? How do you orient them in the room to get the widest soundstage and the best center image? All these are pieces of information you need as a shopper. You can look at the specs of a thing, like pick your favorite thing, right? Cycling, if you're cycling, you can look at bikes. If you're a car guy or gal, you can look at cars. You can look at the specs and say, these things are quantitatively different from each other. But as a holistic experience, you cannot know what that is by just looking at those specs. At the same, you cannot know how those speakers are going to work by listening to just one of them. You need both of them, and not only that, you need both of them to be in your room. You know what I mean? It's only so much that you can actually do by listening or reading about a single speaker listening test.
Yeah, this is exactly the debate because, of course, the review websites that do rely upon the single speaker, mono only for both measurement and listening, they're using that Harman research. Mostly Floyd tools, but some subsequent research that has been done since. They're using that and the calculations that they've come up with, because Harman has this whole predictive curve. Here's not only we're taking what was measured either anechoically or simulating anechoic via like the Klippel system or other means, gated responses, taking that and basing on all the research that they've done, which is extensive, saying that we should be able to calculate something that is reasonably close to an in-room response. And I mean, they've done a whole bunch of back and forth and verification that it does come reasonably close. And then saying, okay, well, if all of that correlates, if that is reliable, then we should be able to rely upon single speaker measurement, single speaker listening, and then extrapolate to how that will perform when it's in stereo or surround sound and in a real room. Now, what I find interesting is, for example, over at like Aaron's Audio Corner, where he has invested in that Klippel system. He's paid the $100,000 and brought that thing in and is starting to do these measurements, which are done on a single speaker. And he has posted the simulated in-room response and then gone ahead and measured the actual response in his real room and said, yeah, by and large, the curve that is calculated, that is the general curve that he ends up measuring. But there are variations from that curve. It's like the overall shape, yeah, got that about right, and that is important. But the complete actual response, no, it's gonna vary from room to room. So the notion, I don't agree that you can just go, okay, I measured a single speaker anechoically or via Klippel or gated response or whatever, and that tells me everything I need to know. No, I don't agree with that. There are outlying things that happen. There are real world inaccuracies that happen, that the full experience does come down to the listening, and I completely agree with you. Very few of us are sitting there with a single speaker. Very few speaker companies are sending out, if they have a new bookshelf or tower model, just send you one. That is very unusual. And I like the idea of the combined. I have no problem with the single speaker measurement. I have no problem with the mono listening. I just don't think I would stop there. I would also try and go ahead and listen and measure them in stereo and see what happens, because more data is a good thing, in my opinion. So I am of the opinion of let's put it all together. But yeah, the methodology that Floyd Toole came up with, we always have to remember that was for the purposes of research. That was for the purposes of, can we correlate objective measurement? If so, which ones? If so, to what precision and degree is necessary to start correlating that stuff to subjective experience of listeners? If we're going to try and do that type of research, we have to limit variables. So it makes all the sense in the world that this is where he landed, because once you start increasing the number of variables, it gets really, really difficult to accurately correlate things. So we have to look at it that way.
Yeah. All right, Eddy and Mercedes with.
I'm pretty sure it's Mercedes.
Well, I will tell you.
I know.
My grandmother was named Mercedes, and this is how it was spelled. So I'm just saying. Yep. Anyways, so we previously helped Eddy pick out an SVS sub and some Q acoustic speakers. He originally intended to start with a new OLED and one pair of speakers, but he quickly tumbled down the rabbit hole, and now he already bought a PV1000, 5 Q acoustic speakers, and a 55-inch OLED in the PS5. We can say, hey, don't blame us for the PS5. We didn't have anything to do with that.
The money is gone.
And thanks to excellent renders that Mercedes, Eddy's girlfriend, had made, we previously suggested some room layout ideas too, and they settled on having the room longer than wide, with the theater area taking up the front half and the rest of the room open at the back. So longer than wide. Okay, yeah. So yes, okay. All
so
right.
Pretty normal, but we do remember that in the original renders that were sent in, they had it wider than long, and still the theater area taking up half the room, but then it would be like open on one side. So this way it's more open at the back, which I like. That makes sense to me.
I think I think so too. And he never told us that there were heating elements on the walls. It never would have worked going the other way.
Yeah, that would have been a challenge, all right. Yeah, heater behind your seat, heater behind your TV.
Yeah. I don't know that would have been the best option there, but I'm glad that you decided on this. This weird fisheye lens thing we got going on.
But it looks good.
Freaking me out. Looks good. It does. I'm not sure what the deal is with the blue wall.
Yeah. There's some accent color going on.
I know. Yeah. You know what would be great instead of accent color? Accent absorption panels. All right, for the surround speakers, Eddy bought some adjustable shelves that can be mounted on the side walls. He's looked up Dolby's guidelines, and for 5.1 setup, they say the surrounds at plus or minus 110 to 120 degrees, but that would put them right where the double door is on the left and the balcony door is on the right. The placement of everything in the room is 100% final. So we can move the couch forward a little bit, but if the surround speakers go just in front of the balcony door, that'd be about plus or minus 95 degrees, just ever so slightly behind the seats. Will that be okay? Should he consider rear corners or some other placement? Just behind the seats is fine.
Just behind the seats is totally fine.
Not only because you could even move them a little bit more forward than that and just have to raise them up a little bit, but that's fine.
Yep.
This is
fine. Mean, what you've described, they are not, for the person who's sitting on the right-hand seat, the speaker is not going to be firing literally straight into their ear. We would want to avoid that, but you're like, no, it'll be a little bit behind. You can elevate them a little bit. So yeah, I think you are perfectly fine, and that is a completely reasonable place.
I think so too. So how does he determine the exact height of the surrounds? They have to consider the walkway to the left of the couch. Again, I've got an article, but it's all about the tweeter height, getting the tweeter so that it can see all the ears. So,
but I see what he means, because we do have this walkway on the left-hand side of the couch, so you wouldn't want to put it like right where you're gonna bang your shoulder into it, let's say. Now you do have the heating element that's over there too, so it's not like you're gonna be brushing yourself against the left wall as you walk by.
Right.
So yeah, let's see. Well, he went with Q acoustics. Now those are not shallow depth speakers. Those have a pretty decent depth to them, so if you put shelves on the side walls or went with the side clumping wall mounts or something like that, they're going to be sticking out a little bit. So I can see where maybe the thought is, let's maybe get them above standing head height so that we don't bang into them or something. I'm almost of the opinion that when you're faced with that scenario, that you kind of put them like right at standing face height, so that there is virtually no way you can walk into them. And that's still an appropriate height, because assuming you're somewhere in the 5.5 to 6 foot tall range, then you're gonna be about 1.5 to 2 feet above your seated ear height, which works out pretty well.
I'll be honest with you, I've got less room on between my couch and my surround speaker shelf that's on the wall, and it is at eye height basically. And even in this dark room, nobody has ever run into it. No one has ever, that I can remember. I can never remember anybody ever hitting that speaker. So take that for what you will. He didn't buy a new AV receiver yet because he's hoping something might come along with all the HDMI 2.1 issues sorted out. He's been eyeing the Denon X3700H. At the moment, he's using a 20-year-old Yamaha that isn't working so great, but at least he has sound. So do we think he should go ahead and buy the 3700H now, or should he suffer with his Yamaha a while longer? The new 2021 models. Will the new 2021 models come out soon? I would expect something to be announced this summer or late summer, August or so.
We usually get some kind of announcement, April or May, but if they were delayed this year, it wouldn't shock us.
Yeah.
But I mean,
between the AKM fire and the Suez Canal being blocked up and global trade being a nightmare right now, I would not be surprised to learn that things were delayed.
It also wouldn't shock me at all if the 2021 receiver models aren't any better on the HDMI 2.1 front than the 2020 models were, because television-wise, nothing has changed on the HDMI ports. We've seen the 2021 televisions coming out, and they got the same HDMI 2.1 ports that the 2020 models had. So, it's all a bit iffy. I think I would try to wait at least until maybe the end of May. You know, it's a couple of months from now, right? It's not as, like, if you had no AV receiver whatsoever, if you literally had these speakers and no sound coming out, I'd be like, yeah, go ahead and buy the thing. But I think since you're kind of, you can play 5.1, it's all right. That I might wait to see if any announcements happen, but I wouldn't blame you if you went ahead and hopped on it. I honestly wouldn't.
If I were to do this, I would go to Accessories for Less.
Well, he's not in the U.S. though.
Whatever.
Okay, I think they were in Spain.
I would jump on the biggest deal that had that I could find. I would want to spend as little money as possible, because and with the assumption that whatever money I'm not spending now, I will have to spend later.
Yeah, what I would probably look for is maybe don't worry about HDMI 2.1, just make sure it has eARC. Because the number of sources you're going to have, like you got your PlayStation 5, obviously that's what you're thinking about. But, even if you had 3 HDMI 2.1 sources, because you got an OLED, you could plug those 3 into your TV, and you've got the 4th eARC port that goes back to your AV receiver. So even if you had PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and a gaming PC, you could still handle all of that. And you're not going to have any other HDMI 2.1 sources beyond those 3. So I think you're in the scenario where as long as the AV receiver you get has eARC, you can rest pretty easy.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a good idea. All right, so Scott says, we'll never believe it. He's moving into a new house. Yeah, that's shocking. The house across the street from me went on sale in the first weekend. It got 11 offers. It's nuts.
It is nuts.
It's nuts around here. I would love to sell my house right now, but I'm living here, and I don't have any place else to live. He's excited, and there's a room he can dedicate to being a home theater. It's about 18 by 14 by 9 feet tall. He intends to go with a projection setup, almost certainly a JVC projector, at least 2 subwoofers, and a full Atmos configuration, speaker configuration. Do we think he should go for an acoustically transparent screen? If the left and right speakers go on the outside edges of the screen, how much room should they have to the side walls? And then what about the center? Would the ideal be? Would the ideal be for it to go behind the screen no matter what? So he's got a 18 by 14.
Yeah.
So if you were you would end up with like probably close to a 14 by 14, like visible, visible space if you went with an acoustically transparent screen and putting everything behind there. That gives you enough room for the speakers and everything else. It kind of depends on what you want to do. So if you're and where you're going to sit.
Yeah, it's all about seating distance. That's really going to be what determines this.
And this, I'm afraid I'm going to scroll down. And he's going to start asking about multiple rows of seats. In which case, you can just scrap all.
He didn't bring it up. And I was thinking if you do want the potential option of a second row, that would be very close to the back wall, but it could be there. Like, the thing is, whenever I'm hearing JVC projector, room of this size,
right,
I'm thinking 120-inch screen, because 120-inch screen is going to fit nicely. It's going to be a size that the JVC projector can light up really nicely for HDR without struggling and without HDR looking exactly the same as STR just because of screen size. And then 120 inches is also at the size where if you do put your center speaker above or below the screen, that it's not so wildly above or below
Right.
that it, starts to become really noticeable. So to me, when you got this 18-foot length front to back, it's like if you sit 10.5 to 12 feet from a 120-inch screen, that's your 40 to 45 degree field of view. 11 feet eyes to screen works really nicely. So if you got that screen mounted flush on the front wall, we're not so worried because 120 inches, you can have the center below, the speakers on either side, that's giving them a good 2 feet to each side wall, which is a pretty nice distance to have. They're not snugged right against the side walls. And then that still gives you something like 7 feet behind your seats where you could conceivably put a second row. It might be only a foot off the back wall, but it's not your primary seats, and it's there, and it gives you a nice distance that having your surround backs makes sense from that front primary row. So to me, like 11 feet eyes to screen, 120 inches, and then you don't go acoustically transparent makes a lot of sense. That's what I would probably do in this room.
Yeah, I agree with this. If you're gonna go with, if you really want the clean look and you want to have that acoustically transparent screen with the false wall up front and all that other stuff, you can do that.
You could.
I think you have to give up that second row of seats.
Yeah, because you could easily still be 12 feet away. It's just now you'd only have 4 feet behind you or something like that.
Yeah. But now you're going to be 12 feet away from a screen that's 2 or 3 feet into the wall.
That's right.
or 4 feet into the room, depending on what speakers and stuff you buy. Yeah, I think you could go either way with it.
You could.
If you're going to go with 2 rows of seats, which I'm almost sure you're going to, then you're not going to have the space for it.
Yeah.
So should this front 3 speakers be in walls or towers? So I guess he's asking if this was an acoustically transparent screen with a false wall. They could be either. They could be both, and they could be neither.
Yeah, so, my vote actually goes to neither.
Yeah, if it were me, I'd be looking at those RBHs that we talked about earlier.
Since they're clearing them out.
They're clearing them out right now, and 950 or 700 or whatever a piece, and I'd not mount them, but I'd have like your false wall, and I'd put like little shelves or little whatever, and put them just right there. You know what I mean? Put them right there, wherever you wanted them to be and locate in relation to your chairs. But that's what I would do. Bookshelf. There's no reason to have towers in here.
Yeah,
None.
Here's the thing. I wouldn't be pointing you at in walls.
No.
To me, when you don't have to do in walls, I'm not going to do in walls. In fact, when I don't have to do on walls, I'm not going to do on walls. I much prefer to go with a bookshelf, or in some cases a tower speaker, but almost always I prefer to go with a bookshelf speaker, simply because you can position a bookshelf speaker more optimally than any other type of speaker. So I would go for bookshelf speakers. As I said, my personal setup, I wouldn't go acoustically transparent. I'd have the screen mounted flush on that front wall, and I'd have a pair of bookshelf speakers to either side and a center below the 120-inch screen, and that is what I would do all day long in here. So my answer would be neither to in walls or towers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I would go bookshelf in here for sure, and just because it's a false wall doesn't mean you have to use an in wall.
Right.
You could just sit on the stand back there. I would put a shelf or something, but you could just sit on the stand.
And to me, going beyond 45-degree field of view, I don't have a problem if you're the type of person who likes to sit in front of the halfway mark at the theater, right? That's where you like to sit much closer, and you get that 50 or 55-degree field of view. Totally cool. That's what you prefer. And maybe that's him. And that's why he's thinking, even in this scenario with this 14-foot width, I want a screen that's almost wall to wall because I love to have me a 55-degree field of view. That now it's starting to make more sense to do false wall, right? Which you can still do. It's just you're probably going to have to get rid of a second row. So either way you want to come at this, but if you're more like me and you prefer a 45-degree field of view, you prefer that 2/3 of the way into the theater. That's where I like to sit, which is actually when you look at all the diagrams of how Dolby sets up the theater, that's the prime spot, 2/3 of the way of the length of the theater from the screen. That is where I like to sit, and that gives you about a 45-degree field of view. At which point I want my left and right speakers to the outside edges of my screen, just to the outside edges, but to the outside edges.
So he asked you to go for 5.2.4 or 7.2.4.
Because he might have more than 2 subs, he's thinking.
Yeah, first of all, I don't think you need more. You probably won't need more than
I mean,
two
the chances
subs in
that a
here.
dedicated enclosed 14-foot by 18-foot room, sound pressure-wise, requires more than two
really.
subs, exceedingly low. The chances that if you're getting a dedicated rectangular room, that you're going to notice a night and day difference between two optimally positioned subs versus four. The value is in two nice subwoofers in this room.
Yes, yes. So should you go 5-point or 7-point? You have, if you're only going with one row of seat, it's 7-point is perfectly fine. I think.
And I mean, honestly, any AV receiver that you buy that can do 5-point, 2.4 can also do 7-point, 2.4, perhaps requiring the addition of a 2-channel amplifier, but I'm like, you're going to end up doing it anyway.
Right. So, yeah, you can. And if you're going to go with 2 rows of seats and one of them's almost completely on that back wall, you might consider not getting that. You might go 5-point, but and then have 2 sets of side surrounds.
2 pairs of side surround speakers instead. So chances are you end up buying the same number of speakers regardless.
Right. It just how you wire them and how you label them will be slightly different. Go. But yeah, that's I think it's the number of seats, the rows that will determine that. How are we doing time wise here?
We still got about 20 minutes left.
Ryan says, is green glue just snake oil? The various specs and tests and data all seem to be supplied by companies that sell it. So can any of that actually be trusted? Are people in the home theater community just blindly parroting the recommendation to use it? To Ryan, it seems like a huge expense. Is it genuinely worth it? So green glue, for those of you who don't know, is this? It's a way of sticking 2 pieces of drywall together. Basically, you put the green glue between the 2, and it doesn't totally dry.
That's right.
It doesn't get hard.
It remains
like
a little bit elastic,
does.
like acoustic caulk is a similar type thing. It never fully hardens, never fully cures.
Right. So the idea here is that if you're trying to soundproof a room, one of the ways to help with that is to add this to your walls, so that some of the energy that is hitting the walls will be absorbed or dampened by the green glue layer. Essentially, now, is it snake oil? It is not. It does something. It's measurable. You can see it.
Yeah, the technical name for this engineering structure is constrained layer damping. So there's this constrained under pressure elastic layer in between 2 solids.
The problem is that many people, I think, will do this and then not do all the other things that you need to do in order to have this work the way it's supposed to.
Or they have done other things that have already accomplished the same thing and then add this to it and go, why didn't it make a bigger difference?
Right. So, if you're building a room from scratch and you say, I want 2 layers of drywall with green glue in between, but then you don't do all the rest of the stuff that you need to do. Like you're like, I still have none of my outlets have are
I put a big hole in
or,
this double layer wall that I made.
And then I drilled my speaker mount into the stud behind there, and they're like, well, it's not working anymore. Well, you defeated it by doing it.
Yes.
So it's not snake oil, but soundproofing is exceedingly hard to do. It is just it's like trying to take it's trying to think of it as like trying to make your room waterproof.
It's really the same thing. It's fluid dynamics. It's exactly the same thing, honestly. Watertight, airtight. So
if you look around your room and you're like, well, water could get out there, or water could get out there, or water could get out here, stuff like that. Those are all the places that air is also able to escape, and that air is where is how the sound transmission.
Right, like I would have to agree with Ryan that, if you're looking at this going, I know I'm gonna have a flanking path here. I can't avoid it. It's part of my HVAC system or something like that.
Right.
And then saying, well, should I go to the expense of doing 2 layers of drywall and decoupling that drywall from the studs and a layer of green glue in between? Should I do all that when I know I've got this flanking path that I can't do anything about? I'm like, oh, yeah, there. It's like, it doesn't really make sense to do all of that and then still have this bigger problem that can't be resolved by any of these other techniques. So from that point of view, it's not a blanket statement like you should just always build your room with green glue. It's like, no, if you can address all the other things that go into soundproofing, then it is not snake oil. There are independent studies that have been done, like National Research Council of Canada has done that. And it's like, basically it was the equivalent of taking, it was something like 7 or 8 layers of regular drywall, just sandwiching those together with nothing in between them versus just 2 layers with, and in that case, it wasn't specifically green glue. It was any form of constrained layer damping. So are there alternatives to green glue? I mean, I'm sure there must be some, but I mean, what's funny is, like, he's saying it looks like a huge expense. There used to be, well, there still is. There's like Quiet Rock, which is pre-sold, already fabricated that way. There were other glues that were on the market prior to green glue. They all cost way more than green glue does. So it's funny that now we've gotten to the point where green glue looks like the expensive option. It was at one time way less expensive than your other methods of purchasing constrained layer damping.
It's kind of like that sub dude from
Oralex
used to be the cheapest option out there for subwoofer isolation pads, and now we're like, ugh.
Well, and I mean, the thing is with green glue, like, you don't want to just buy the individual tubes that look like caulk tubes. Like, you want to get the big, however many it is, 5 or 25 gallon buckets. Like, that's what you want to get when you're doing a room. And that point, it's much less expensive. So I see where you're coming from, Ryan, but I can assure you, it's not pure snake oil. It is not that, but it is just one component of soundproofing your room. You can't just do that and only that and then go, why didn't it work so great?
Yeah. He also asked, what about filling your seating riser or a stage at the front of your room with sand? It feels like maybe that's just dogma or some sort of rite of passage. Do you actually benefit from lugging hundreds of pounds of sand into your room? Or is it one of those, well, I did it, so it must be providing a benefit situation? The idea here is that it makes your riser or your stage or whatever it is inert, so that it's not going to vibrate. It doesn't necessarily work all that well, and you could just overbuild the thing and put a million screws into it, and it helps nearly as much. We have talked about this a number of times on the podcast, and we have gone back and forth from, sometimes we recommend it, sometimes we don't. There's people who ask us if they should put holes in the side of their risers and fill it up with insulation to turn into a bass trap, and we're like, no, that's not really a great idea.
I'm not a fan of doing it. There is such a thing as engineering it to be done properly, but if you're just going to drill some random holes in it, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of adding mass and mechanically damping things. I'm a fan of doing. I mean, here's the thing: if you're building this riser where it doesn't have a flat piece of plywood on the bottom as like basically the subfloor layer, if it's just like open joist slats below there, like putting sand in there isn't going to help you. You have to have a physical bottom to the thing and then have it all joined together. And now you're just adding extra mass and mechanically damping it. That is not snake oil. Is it completely worth it? I mean, no, if you just want to go to the effort of bracing, cross bracing, and more screws, that'll work too.
Right. So there, I mean, it's all about just keeping the thing from vibrating. And I will tell you that there's some people who like it, but I have been on risers that have vibrated, and it's the single most distracting thing I've ever experienced.
Because, I mean, they're never uniform. They vibrate much more at certain frequencies than others.
Right.
It's just,
So, you'll be sitting there, everything's fine. All of a sudden it starts to vibrate, and you maybe don't even hear what it's vibrating from. It's something that you're supposed to be feeling, but maybe the volume's not up loud enough or whatever, but the stupid thing is resonating with it, and there you go. So adding mass does fix that, but so does adding bracing and everything else. So you can overbuild it. So, pick your poison. If you don't want to lug around the sand, then put a bunch of more 2x4s in that thing. Nick says, Sony announced that their new PlayStation Store for PS3, PSP, and PS Vita games will be permanently closing in July. They've clarified that for the time being. That means if you won't be able to make any new purchases, including DLC, for any of those systems after that date, but that anything you have already purchased can still be re-downloaded. However, some users have already found that if their PS3 system cannot connect to Sony's servers, sometimes just because of the internal clock is out of sync, then the system won't let them play games that they've already purchased and downloaded. Even worse, on PS4, physical games that you bought on disc can cease to work if your server connection isn't working. This has Nick seriously questioning whether he wants to buy a PS5. Sony's handling of DRM on their games seems like a bad deal if it means that the games you purchase, potentially even physical discs, can stop working just because they shut down some servers. What are our thoughts? I wrote an article about this yesterday. It hasn't been published yet because I read the same article you did.
Sure.
Nick. And this is the danger of digital content, you know, and on top of that, you know, if there is an online component to your content, if those servers go away, if the service goes away, if whatever it is goes away, will your content still work even if you bought the disc? That is a concern, and I do not do not assume that this is a Sony specific problem.
No, that is exactly it. Yeah.
This is going to be, if you think that Microsoft is any different and their Xbox system is somehow going to be immune to this, you have lost your mind.
I mean, it goes for
this
Steam
is
too.
Universal.
You know, Steam is not like unassailable. So.
Right. The Epic Game Store, the Blizzard Store, all that stuff. That can all go away. Yeah. We've seen it happen before with downloaded movies, and fortunately, for the most part, they've either transferred to another service so that you got access to it, but sometimes they don't, and it just goes away and it's gone.
I mean, so realistically, also, I mean, I do have to ask, how often do you truly go back and play 15, 16, 20-year-old games? I mean, I know...
if you're a speedrunner, maybe you do it all the time, but that's a very small percentage of the population.
You know, so, I mean, this... people... I mean, I'm right there with you. I'm not blaming anybody. I love the idea of backwards compatibility, but, you know, is it a reason to not buy a new game console and enjoy the new games that are coming out that you were looking forward to? Because it's not like... Sony is not going to shut down the servers for a PlayStation 5 game that just launched. They're not going to shut that down next year. Like, it's not going to happen. So the notion that you're going to avoid the new system because the current DRM scheme means that there are some PlayStation 3 games that are going to go away on you. I can't get behind that way of thinking. I mean, I don't like this. I love the idea of preservation. I love the idea that the original version is still playable in some form. You know, philosophically, that's what I would prefer. But realistically, you know, this is a way that they can resell you the new, you know, version that works on the current system. That this is a way of pushing people towards game streaming, right? Because they got PlayStation Now. They're like, hey, you want to play your PlayStation 3 games? Come sign up for PlayStation Now. You've got all the PlayStation 3 games there for a monthly subscription, and you stream them instead of own them, right? So, yeah, that's the way it's going. I don't like it, but I don't see it as a reason to avoid buying a PlayStation 5.
So when we look at, you know, movies, in particular TV shows, you know, is this also a concern there? Well, DVDs don't have an online component. You don't have to worry about them. You bought the DVD, DVD will always work. The VHS will always work. Well, you're going to watch a VHS? More power to you, dude. I'm not going to watch a VHS. I don't even like watching DVDs anymore, but, you know. What about Blu-rays? Well, they have an online component, but it's not necessary for playback. It does allow them to update the trailers that you see, and sometimes some online other things.
And there's region locking on them too.
There is region locking on Blu-rays, but there's also region locking in your digital streaming library too. Because if you leave here and you go to Australia or wherever, if you're Australia and you come here, it's not the same iStore. You know, it's not the same PlayStation Store. It's not the same any of that stuff. So suddenly all of your content's gone anyways. Ultra HD Blu-rays do not have region locks, so that's a benefit. And I don't think that there's any online component that's required for playing.
Seem to be, yeah.
Buying a physical disc means that you will still have that access to that movie. But there's also the other side of this where, you know, if you bought an iTunes version of a movie and they say, okay, well, now we have 4K versions of it, Apple just went, okay, well, you can have iTunes, you can have the 4K one too. They just upgrade your entire library like that. So yeah, you run the risk of maybe losing your content if the iTunes or Google Play or whatever goes away, but then you also have the convenience factor and the accessibility factor. You can watch it, if you're on a train someplace and you're like, oh, you know what, I'm bored, I'm going to watch this movie that I love so much, I'll go to Disney Plus and watch it, or I'll go to my iTunes account and stream it. You'll have access to it that a physical disc just doesn't give you. So there's benefits to both sides of this, and there's also problems. I mean, you don't ever have to worry about your digital disc getting, or your digital copy getting scratched, or you stick it in a broken. Oh, my favorite one is you stuck it in a player, you forgot about the player, and then you can't find the disc, you don't know where it is, and you gave the player to somebody else, or in my case, send it back after I was done reviewing it, and there went the first disc of the Firefly season, which was gone forever. So I was real happy about that. All right, Greg. Greg says we've helped him a lot in his theater, both from listening to other people's questions and directly. He had the basement theater that suffered water damage, so it's been a while since he's written to us, but now that he's finally ready for some final paint touch-ups, he's got some questions. Overall, his room is 17.5 by 11. He's built a false wall up front, 15 inches from the cement foundation on the back from the cement foundation to the back of his false wall. The whole front wall is covered in insulation for absorption, and his Polk RTI series front speakers are hidden behind there, placed on shelves. So look at him listening to us. All right, well, we can't really. Okay, so there's a riser in the back of the room. There's acoustic panels to the sides, and
that's all coming up.
Yeah. So thanks to our advice, he went with a 110-inch silver ticket screen, a JVC RS540 projector the previous owner had already wired the room for 7.1, so he started with that. But more recently, he upgraded all of the seats to HT Market recliners, 3 love seats in total, with the front love seat being the primary seats, and then 2 love seats on the back 8-inch riser at the back. On the 8-inch riser at the back of the room. The 2 love seats at the back meant that he had to move his gear rack to one subwoofer, so now his 2 subs are at the midpoints of his side walls, and his gear rack is in the storage room on the other side of the back wall. Since his theater and the storage room share the drop tile ceiling, it was easy to run new speaker wire, including behind this false wall, and that allowed him to upgrade over the 16 gauge the previous owner had run with several patches in places. All in all, he's thrilled with the performance of his theater. So this is the old seats, and this is the new seats. Okay, so the 2 love seats are side by side on that back riser.
That's right.
And the front love seat is basically flanked on either side by a subwoofer, and is just by itself up there. Great. This is great.
Yes.
So during the pandemic, he made some DIY panels. He wound up with 5 2x4 2 foot by 4 foot by 3.5 inch thick panels that he has mounted on his side walls. The door on his left wall near the front is sliding door, so he wasn't able to mount a panel there to match the panel on the right wall near the front. Then he also made 3 1.5 foot square panels, also 3.5 inches thick, so that he put on his back wall. So questions. And again, his front wall is all.
Yeah, there's absorption all behind his false wall at the front.
Oh, those panels are side by side. They're not spread out. They're like right smack dab in the center. Okay.
Yeah, they're only a 1.5 feet square, so he put 3 panels right in the middle of his back wall, just above his back row of seats.
Yeah. To start, he found some metal clips that attached to the T-bars of his drop tile ceiling. They provide a threaded screw head, and he was able to flush mount his old Polk satellite speakers to his ceiling using the threaded inserts. He put a bit of museum putty on the backs of the speakers to stop the rattles. And even though they have a small port on the back for Atmos purposes, they seem to sound fine this way. Do we have any thoughts or concerns? Anything to change, or is this fine for Atmos? I don't even have to look. It's fine for Atmos.
If you're not complaining, if you are not noticing any issues, then it is fine for Atmos. I kind of like these little clip things with the threads coming down as a way of flush mounting to the ceiling there. And yeah. Good.
I just see him up there screwing the entire speaker on like this, just spinning it. That's great.
But yeah,
I like it.
Looks good to me. And if you're not noticing any problems, thumbs up.
So his kids love the new recliners, and when he was preparing to buy and install them, Greg decided to watch a whole movie while sitting in the back row to make sure it's a good experience back there. He found the current surround back speakers poor in terms of placement, and he found them distracting. He had those in spots because of the previous owner's wiring, but he has free reign to change them now. Greg has always thought he needed surround backs for gaming, but he has since experimented with running a system as just a 5.2.4, and he actually hasn't missed the surround backs at all. Ha! See? All you surround back lovers, suck it.
Jeez. Where do people get the idea that Tom isn't a fan of surround backs?
I don't know. I've been maligned and misconstrued.
Oh, dear.
All right. Anyway, sounds still seem to come from behind him. Maybe that's Dolby surround upmixing. Maybe it's just his brain. But whatever makes it work, he isn't so worried about having surround back speakers anymore. His surrounds are JBL Studio, and his surround backs are DefTech. They have significantly different sensitivity specs. So what do we think he should do? Should he nix surround backs entirely? Should he move his DefTechs to basically the rear corners? If the DefTechs go in the rear corners firing straight across at each other, should he wire them as surround backs or wire them in series to make them a second pair of surrounds? And if he wires them in series, will the sensitivity mismatch present a problem? Yes, it will present a problem.
It would be a problem to wire them in series together.
They would be louder.
Yeah,
they will be louder than the other ones. So, what would you do? What should you do? You should run 5-point. You should run in the 5-point system. You should get rid of the DefTechs or get rid of the other ones, and then buy a pair that matches, and then wire them together as two side surrounds. That's what I would do. And I would put them on the sidewalls firing. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I'm trying to I was just kind of intrigued by the idea of, you know, moving them wider apart, because he's like, yeah, the experience in that back row when they're, you know, like
they're very close together.
Yeah, when they're close together on the back wall and right above your head, he's like, yeah, that's no good. So okay, I'm total agreement with that and not super surprised. But the idea that you move them sort of to the rear corners, but still label them as surround backs and just have them so they're not like pointing right at any seat, you know, they're just more diffuse. I'm like, that might work. That might be okay. You know, it would mean not having to buy any new speakers. That's sort of why I'm thinking of it. I'm intrigued by the idea. Because I think that would actually, I think it would work. I think it would work. So here's the thing, though. Either way, we're imagining that we're moving the speakers that are on the back wall to the side walls at the back of the room. We're both thinking that. And then we're really just talking about a difference of wiring, so you could try both. Because, you know, even if you did the series wiring thing, which we don't recommend you do with two different pairs of speakers with significantly different sensitivities, but even if you did want to try it, you don't have to change the wiring, like, other than you'll need to install some wires basically in your rear corners. You can do the series wiring back at the AV receiver. Yeah, we've talked about that before, where, you know, you still have the run of wire that goes to your regular surrounds, you still have the run of wire that goes to those rear corners, but then you just wire it black output of the AV receiver to black input of speaker 1, red output of the AV receiver to red input of speaker number 2, and then the two remaining leads just join to each other. But that can happen back at the AV receiver. You don't have to do it inside the walls. So I think, yeah, we're in agreement that moving those rear speakers to the rear corners makes sense. Exactly how they end up wired, I think you can play with. I think you can do some experimenting, try them as surround backs in the rear corners, try them as a second pair of side surrounds, and see what you like better.
Yeah. The problem, for those of you that can't see this, he's got them so that they are basically, the surround backs are basically like his front love seat. They would be on if his seat was against the back wall, they would be just off the outside shoulder of the two people sitting in the love seats. So they are too close together. Currently.
They're closer to the THX recommendation where they were
right,
really
which is
close.
How mine are, but that's because, again, I have a door, which is the problem here. He doesn't have that. So if he spaced them out further, like they were more supposed to be in line with the front speakers, they would still be firing into the back of somebody's head because the two love seats in the back are almost wall to wall. Right. And so that's why he's thinking of putting them all the way in the corners, because that basically puts them on the outsides of both of these two love seats. The outsides of all
the seats in the room.
Right. You could experiment with it. It's going to actually physically move them a lot closer to your top rears or whatever we're calling those Atmos speakers.
I'm not worried about that.
But it's not a huge problem there. Okay, wait. Since he wants to fully arrange his speakers, panels, and posters before his final paint touch-ups, do we have any advice about moving or adding more acoustic panels? And would we reposition his surrounds since they're a couple of feet behind his front row? The surrounds are fine. I mean, you could cheat them in a little bit, but once you recline those seats, I think you're pretty close to right where they should be anyway. So,
yeah, I agree with that.
I would make more of the big panels and I would put some on the left side wall for sure, because I can see that one. I'm scrolling.
You mean like left side wall more towards the back of the room?
Yeah, the back of the room, I would put 2 more panels on both of them, and I would put panels behind those seats back there, but I'm wondering if you don't have them because when you recline, the seats almost touch the wall, which is what I think is happening.
I mean, if the ones that are like in the center of the back wall aren't interfering with the, the 2 seats that are closest, then having more panels on the back wall shouldn't be a problem for the outer seats. It's not like anything is changing there. I'm in agreement with more on the back wall. For sure. Yeah. The
side back wall is the back wall. I'm looking. I can't really.
I'm looking at his left side wall. So I mean, ideally, I kind of would have a panel where the door is, to match what's on the right, and also because that's probably a first reflection point. But look, real world, it doesn't work. It's a sliding door. You're not going to put a panel on it. That's fine. I would consider the panels like he's gone like on the right side wall. He's gone. Acoustic panel, then poster, then another panel. So the third panel on his right side wall is like almost behind his front row of seats.
Yeah.
I would consider flipping the poster and those third panels so that the 3 panels that you have along your right side wall, they're all beside and in front of your front row of seats. And then match that on the left side wall, because the panels that are there like in between the front and second row, they ain't doing much. If there's some room reverberation, maybe they're knocking that down a bit. But as far as spot treatment goes, the panels that are in between the 2 rows of seats aren't really doing much of anything. I would potentially consider too, since this room is fully carpeted, and now if you do add some panels to the back wall, and you are going to add any more panels to the side walls, I would consider going for combo panels. Because I think you're starting to verge on just a whole lot of absorption and no diffusion. And I would consider having combo panels. In fact, I might put combo panels on the back wall to closer to the side walls, on either side of the 3 panels that you already have back there. I might do combo panels back there, combo panels, like 1 more pair of combo panels somewhere on the side walls, just so they get a little bit more diffusion into this room.
So you're saying move the poster forward 1 panel?
No, I'm saying move the poster back a panel. So that, if you're looking at that right side wall, he'd have the 3 acoustic panels basically all together.
So I think that poster faces the other poster on the other wall. Yeah. So you would have to move that as well, but then it hits the light.
Oh, yeah, the light's got... Well, they'd have to lower them, I guess, which maybe would look weird.
Yeah, I think that's why that's the way it is.
Yeah, you're pretty right. Yeah.
In which case, I think you can leave it.
I'm not angry.
Or build a smaller panel and put it underneath, I guess. Or buy a smaller panel and put it underneath. I mean, these are just. You really can do nothing in this room except for add some more absorption to the back wall.
Yeah, I'd like to see more on the back wall. That's if you're like, what's the minimum that we would recommend? It would be a little bit more on your back wall. Yeah.
Okay. She says, unfortunately, something, most likely a thrown toy, and he's got 2 dog beds up front, so I wonder what that was, has created a very small tear in his projection screen. He taped the back of the screen, and it's a very small blemish, but it's right in the middle. He can't help but notice it. He actually has a silver ticket gray screen material on hand, so should he swap to the gray material, or is there some way to patch his white screen? Could a line of whiteout or white paint repair the blemish? I would contact your manufacturer for this, but I would not swap to the gray screen. Oh, you've got complete light control in here.
Yeah.
And I think it's just going to make your, like our other guy who was like, it looks dim. Yeah. I think you might be saying, oh, wait a second, it's not bright anymore. I mean,
it's now, it is that JVC.
My blacks are like like a black hole, but the brights aren't very bright anymore. Well, you got a gray screen, Haas.
I mean, thankfully the screen isn't so large that the light output of the JVC you have couldn't overcome the switch to a gray screen. You would probably want to recalibrate, unquestionably, because it will look dimmer, but because the screen is 110 inches, you do have the light output capability to contend with that. I mean, if you're just stuck, if it's going to be a wait to get a replacement material, I wouldn't be the end of the world to put the gray material up there. You could live with that for a while, but I mean, I definitely wouldn't try whiteout.
Probably he's the only one noticing.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't try whiteout on the little tear. I wouldn't try to paint it or fix it in that way. No. I mean, unfortunately, once a projection screen gets a tear in it, is there anything you can do? I haven't ever come across a good solution.
I would have to I have to contact Seymour AV. Yeah. I would ask them if there's any way to repair it. And I think their answer would be no. Feels like there should be like an iron on, but then it's going to be, it's just the slightest, because it's projected image. Once you get the slightest little blemish on there, if you notice it, there's like no way to not notice it. Yeah. So speakers and sub are a bit of a Frankenstein's collection. Is Polk RTI front 3, JBL Studio Surrounds, DefTech surround backs, Polk home theater in a box satellites for Atmos, one HSU STF2 sub, and one SVS PB10 NSD. If money were no object, he might upgrade all of them, but budget is a big factor. And as far as he can tell, after treating his room and running Odyssey XC32, it sounds great. So we'd like us to put a number on that. If we brought our speakers and subs, Rob's Sierras and my SVS Ultras, into his room, what percentage is he getting now? How much better would it be our speakers versus his, just for fun? Yeah, there's no way that's not going to hurt your feelings. Yeah, our stuff will crush your crazy room, man. Your stuff sucks. Ours is the best. Just go home, stupid speaker. I don't know that. Okay, so the thing that I think that you would notice would probably be dynamics and high-end clarity. I think would be the thing that would probably you would probably notice. You might notice more bass. I don't think so. I mean, we'd have Rob's subs are way bigger than mine, and my subs are big enough that they would crush your room as well. So,
but we also wouldn't be turning them up that high. So.
But the extension on Rob's would be lower than the extension on mine, and the extension on mine is lower than the extension on yours. Okay. So, maybe not by much, but a little bit. So, are you going to notice that? Probably not. I don't think. I
mean, in a test tone.
Yeah, test tone. As far as watching, or listening to content critically, I don't know that I could put a number on it, but I think that you would say, yes, this sounds better than my system if you could A/B it back and forth. Okay. I don't think that you would say to yourself, I need to immediately go out and buy these speakers. But what you would probably do, regardless of, and there's lots of other speakers out there too that could make you feel this way. You would have a shopping list that you would then start working towards. I don't necessarily think that you would feel like I can't even go in that room anymore. You're a disappointment to me and your mother, and we can't wait till you move out. I don't think that that's the reaction you would have. I think you would come back going, I got most of the way there. You know what I mean? That's okay. That was better. I can hear it. It's better. But I got most of the way there with my little Frankenstein home theater in a box Atmos stuff. I think that's the way you would feel.
All right. I mean, I've basically done almost this exact, like I have some Polk RTI series speakers, probably the older version than he has, but I've got those. And I mean, I've done the comparison, those to my Ascend Sierra RAL. Now in my tiny, tiny little room, heavily treated, to me, there's no question. There's an audible difference. I wouldn't blind mistake my Ascend speakers for my Polk speakers. I would be able to tell them apart blind. I'm very confident in that. It is the high frequency extension. Like the Polks are intentionally rolled off, which is not a terrible design in lower price speakers because it gives you a wider sweet spot and it avoids any sense of harshness. Helps with the power handling too. So, but yeah, the high frequency extension is there. There's more detail. The transient response is faster. So let's see. I will put a number on it of not more than 20%. I could say perhaps as high as 20% better. Completely arbitrary number that means absolutely nothing. There is no scale that it's tied to, but not more than that. So I agree with Tom where you say, hey, I got 80% of the performance for what, like 1/20th of the price, I think, because he said in his email he got all his speakers used and stuff. So if you're getting 80% for 1/20th of the price, that's a pretty good way to console yourself. But yeah, I think if I brought my entire suite of speakers and amplifiers and put them in your room, that blindfolded, you would be able to tell them apart. I'm pretty confident in that. And yeah, I'll say 20% better.
There you go. Who do we have left, Rob?
Jason C. was on the list, and that was it for this week, although his is a very long and multi-part question, but there it is. And then anything that came in on Monday or Tuesday.
All right. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Don, Chris, and Paul for going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and leaving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 124 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yes, indeed. Don, Chris, and Paul, thank you very much for the PayPal donations. Thanks so much to our 124 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast, which is the place to go if you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation.
Don, we want to thank Don for mentioning us to RBH, Mitch for talking us up to SVS and GIC, Greg for talking us up to HT Market, and our notes of gratitude from Joe, Don, Mitch, Dan, Greg, and Jason.
Indeed. Mitch, again, I'll say it. Let's say, no, wait, Don was first. RBH, thanks for talking us up there. Mitch for SVS and GIC. Tom, too, for talking us up to GIC. Can't forget about our listener of the week, Tom. And Greg for talking us up to HT Market. And then Joe, Don, Mitch, Dan, Greg, and Jason. We do appreciate those notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going light at the end of the tunnel. Stick in there, everybody. Hang on. We're seeing some hope. And a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
That's right. If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.